When I was 16, my life derailed in a way that still messes with my head. You know how some families sweep things under the rug and just pretend everything's fine? Yeah, mine didn't even bother with the pretending. I'm Aaron, and back then, I was just your average high school kid, quiet, decent grades, didn't go out much, played guitar in my room to unwind. My family wasn't perfect, but I thought we were okay. My dad, Mark, was a numbers guy, accountant for a logistics firm, always practical, always calm. My mom, Denise, was the complete opposite. Loud, opinionated, always right even when she wasn't. And then there was my older brother, Kyle. 2 years older, charming when he wanted to be, manipulative when he didn't get his way. My dad used to call him the golden boy because of how my mom treated him. It was like he could do no wrong. Spoiled, but smart enough to play the role of the perfect son when adults were around. At home, things were different. I can't count how many times I get blamed for stuff Kyle did. Stupid things, breaking dishes, forgetting chores, sneaking out. But every time, my mom took his word over mine like it was gospel. She had this uncanny ability to look at me and see guilt even when I hadn't done a thing. I used to think maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough to be seen. But that illusion shattered when I came home from school one Tuesday afternoon to find my dad sitting in his armchair, looking like the blood had drained from his face. He didn't even look up when I walked in, which was weird. My dad always greeted us, even if it was just a grunt or a nod. But this time, he was holding a folder, thick and bulging with paper. My mom stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they almost disappeared. Kyle, nowhere to be seen. The second I put my backpack down, my mom snapped, "Aaron, sit down." I remember the room felt colder than usual. It was late fall, and the air outside had started to bite, but inside felt worse. I sat on the edge of the couch, confused and uneasy. My dad finally looked up, and his eyes, normally so steady, looked off. Betrayed. That's the only word that comes close. "Aaron," he said slowly, "your mother found something in our account statements. A withdrawal. A big one. $10,000. Care to explain?" I blinked. "What?" "Don't play dumb," my mom snapped, voice rising. "We know you took it." I laughed, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? I don't even know how to access your bank account." "Don't lie," she said, stepping closer. "You've always been sneaky, always hiding things. You used your dad's login. We found the money gone right after you stayed home sick that week." What was she talking about? I had the flu. Legitimately. I spent most of that week curled up in bed, barely able to breathe through my nose, much less hack into online banking. And the idea that I would steal that kind of money? It was insane. I started to protest, but my dad raised a hand. "I want to believe you, son," he said quietly. "But the money's gone. There's no sign of a break-in. No outside access. Someone in this house did it." "I didn't touch anything," I said, standing up. "Why would I steal 10 grand? What would I even spend that on?" My mom's eyes narrowed like she was waiting for me to slip up. "That's what we want to know. And your brother says he saw you using dad's laptop." I froze. "Kyle." Of course. I remember feeling like I'd just been punched in the chest. Kyle had always lied when it suited him, but this was next level. I hadn't even touched my dad's laptop. It stayed on the home office desk, and it was password protected. Kyle, though, he was always in that room. He liked to snoop, liked to play pretend as the favorite son in dad's chair when no one was home. "He's lying," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't do it. I swear." "This is crazy." My mom scoffed. "Of course you'd say that. Lying comes easy to you, doesn't it?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the money. This was about every little resentment she'd built up toward me. Every time I didn't act like Kyle. Every time I spoke up. Every time I existed in a way she didn't like. This was her opportunity to throw me under the bus and feel justified. My dad looked back down at the papers, silent. And that silence broke something in me. He wasn't defending me. Not really. He was just folding in on himself, unsure. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept waiting for Kyle to come home, for him to walk in like nothing happened. When he finally did, around midnight, I was sitting in the hallway outside his room. He looked at me, blinked, and smiled like this was all some joke. "You messed up, man," he whispered. I stood up, heart racing. "You told them I stole $10,000. He shrugged. "Well, someone had to take the fall. And they're already convinced it was you. So why not?" "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do that?" Kyle leaned closer, the fake kindness gone from his face. Because I could. I don't think I've ever felt rage like that. Not before. Not since. But even worse was the helplessness. I wanted to yell, to drag him downstairs and force him to confess. But I knew how that would go. My mom would defend him. My dad would hesitate. And me? I just looked like I was lashing out. The next morning, everything spiraled faster than I could keep up with. My mom said she'd made an appointment. She said I needed help, that I had a problem, that she'd talked to a counselor and found a place for troubled teens who struggle with truth and accountability. A behavioral rehab. At first, I thought she was bluffing, that this was some twisted punishment. But when a van showed up 2 days later with 2 stone-faced men in polos saying they were from a youth facility in the next state over, reality slapped me in the face. I begged my dad not to let them take me. I told him I didn't do it. That Kyle was lying. That mom was wrong. But he just stood there, staring at the floor, fists clenched at his sides. The last thing I saw before the van doors closed was Kyle standing in the driveway, hands in his hoodie pocket, smirking. And that was the beginning of a 2-year nightmare I would never wish on anyone. When I first arrived at the center, I thought there'd been a mistake. Like someone would realize this whole thing was a misunderstanding. That my dad would show up and take me home. That someone, anyone, would believe me. But no one came. And the place wasn't some warm, healing rehab center with therapy dogs and cozy couches. It was cold. Institutional. Cement walls painted a lifeless beige. Linoleum floors that echoed every footstep. Bars on the windows, not like jail, but close enough. No cell phones. No contact with the outside world for the first 3 weeks. I wasn't even allowed to call my dad until my orientation period was over. They called it behavioral rehab, but it was really a holding pen for kids whose parents wanted them out of sight. Most of the guys there were dealing with stuff way heavier than me. Drug addiction, gang affiliation, even a few who'd been in juvie before this. And then there was me. The kid who supposedly stole 10 grand and couldn't stop lying. That was my file. That's how the staff treated me. Every day started at 6 a.m. sharp. You got up, made your bed military style, stood in silence for morning head count. Then came group therapy, then chores, then structured outdoor exercise, which was just walking laps around a fenced-in yard with some benches and one sad basketball hoop with no net. Talking during meals wasn't allowed unless it was approved. Any sign of defiance got you docked a privilege. Too many infractions, and you lost your weekly call. Or worse, they put you on reflection. That was basically solitary confinement with a journal and a Bible. I kept my head down mostly, but it didn't matter. The staff already had me labeled as a manipulator, someone who played innocent to avoid responsibility. I was just another entitled kid in their eyes, and I couldn't prove otherwise. When I finally got my first phone call 3 weeks in, I called home. My dad picked up. My voice cracked when I heard him say my name. "Dad, please," I said. "I didn't do it. You have to believe me." There was a pause on the other end. I heard him exhale slowly. "Aaron, I want to believe you. But your mother, she said there's more. She said you tried to delete the bank records." "What? That's not true. I don't even know how to do that." "She showed me your browser history," he said. "There were searches about online banking, password recovery. That's when I realized what Kyle must have done. He'd used my laptop, searched things to make it look like I was planning something, maybe even logged into Dad's email from it. I didn't search any of that," I said, tears starting to form. "Kyle used my laptop. He's setting me up. You know him. You've seen him lie before." But Dad's voice was distant now. "Look, son, you just need to focus on getting better. We'll talk more when you come home." And just like that, the line went dead. My 5-minute call was up. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my hands clenched into fists under the blanket. There was a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. This wasn't just a punishment anymore. This was exile. My own parents, my own family, had thrown me away. 2 months in, we had family visitation day. One Saturday every 8 weeks, families were allowed to visit approved residents for a few hours in the courtyard. I spent the whole week before it hoping my dad would come, that he'd look me in the eye and see the truth. But it wasn't Dad who showed up. It was Mom. She walked in like she owned the place. Bright lipstick, sunglasses, big smile that didn't reach her eyes. She brought Kyle with her. He was wearing designer sneakers and a new jacket. I sat across the table from them, still in my plain gray facility-issued hoodie. "Well, don't you look healthier?" she said like it was a compliment. Kyle just sat there, twirling a plastic fork between his fingers and smirking. I didn't say anything. I couldn't trust myself to speak. We came to check on your progress, Mom continued. Kyle's been doing wonderfully. He got into the college of his choice. A partial scholarship, too. Cool, I muttered. She leaned forward. Aaron, I hope you understand that this is for your own good. You've always had trouble with accountability. This place is helping you grow. I didn't steal anything, I said quietly. Her smile faded. You're still clinging to that lie? I looked straight at her. Kyle did it. You know it. You're just covering for him. She laughed. Actually laughed. That's your problem, Aaron. Always playing the victim. Always blaming others. It's pathetic. Kyle finally spoke. Man, maybe you should just write a book about how life's so unfair. Bet no one would buy it, though. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the concrete. One of the staff members looked over, hand already moving toward his walkie-talkie. You think this is funny? I snapped at Kyle. You ruined my life. You're the reason I'm in here. He shrugged. Or maybe you're just finally where you belong. That was it. I lost it. I lunged across the table, not to hit him. I don't even know what I was trying to do, but the staff rushed over and dragged me away. My mom's voice rang out behind me. See? This is what we're dealing with. You see why he needs help. I got put on reflection for 3 days after that. Alone in a tiny room, fluorescent light buzzing above me, writing in a journal I didn't believe in. The only thing that kept me sane was knowing I only had a year and a half left. A year and a half until I turned 18. A year and a half until I could leave and never look back. The months crawled by. I got good at hiding my emotions. Good at nodding when I was supposed to, parroting back the lines the counselors wanted to hear. I take responsibility. I am working on honesty. I understand the consequences of my actions. Every time I said those words, it felt like I was killing a piece of myself. But it was the only way to get through. I didn't see my dad again during that time. He never visited. Never called. I think deep down, he wanted to believe I was innocent. But my mom was the one controlling the narrative. And Kyle? He'd moved on. By the time I was finally released, he was already in college, living in a dorm paid for by the same savings I'd supposedly stolen. I got home on a rainy Thursday afternoon. My mom picked me up from the center, all smiles again, as if nothing had happened. The drive was silent except for the wipers squeaking across the windshield. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my dad through the window, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of mail. He didn't say much when I walked in. Just a nod. A quick welcome home. He looked older. Tired. Like something had been eating at him. I moved back into my old room, though it wasn't really mine anymore. Everything had been rearranged. Some of my stuff was gone. My guitar, my posters, even my old sketchbooks. When I asked where they were, my mom said she'd donated some things because they carried bad energy. The next few weeks were tense. I didn't talk much. Neither did Dad. Mom acted like things were normal, family dinners, small talk, reminders to apply for community college. But something in the air felt off, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then, one night, it happened. It was late. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to grab some water. As I passed the office, I saw the light on and heard rustling. I peeked in. My dad was sitting on the floor with a cardboard box in front of him. Old papers, envelopes, folders. What are you doing? I asked. He didn't look up, just said, cleaning. I stepped closer. He held up a dusty envelope with Kyle's name on it. Inside were bank statements, dated 2 years back, right around the time the money had vanished. He looked at one page, then another, then another. Dad, I said. He didn't answer, just stared at a printout for a withdrawal made at an ATM. One that had a camera. One that Kyle always used near his favorite sandwich place. Another withdrawal, same week, different location. Cash pulled out in exact amounts that added up to $10,000 over the span of 6 days. Suddenly, he looked up at me. Did you ever touch my laptop? He asked, voice quiet. No, I said. I told you that 2 years ago. He nodded slowly. And Kyle, he had your laptop that week, right? Your mom said he was helping you reset it because you were sick. My throat went dry. Yeah. He stood up, holding the stack of papers. I think I made a huge mistake. Footsteps behind us. Mom. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed again, but this time, her face wasn't smug. It was pale. Mark, she said, let's not dig this up again. He turned to her, and I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was betrayal. Pure and raw. You knew. he whispered. I was protecting our family, she said. You don't understand. You knew, he repeated, louder this time. You let him take the fall. You let your son rot in a facility because you couldn't face the truth about your favorite. She tried to walk toward him. Mark, please. He stepped back. Don't. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear. My mom turned to me then, and for the first time, I saw something crack in her expression. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. My dad looked at me. Pack a bag, he said quietly. We're leaving. And then he turned to her, voice low and cold. I'll be filing tomorrow. When you go through something like that, being locked away for a lie, watching your own family turn their backs on you, you don't come out the same. You just don't. Part of me was still 16 when I stepped out of that house for the last time, gripping a duffel bag that held the few clothes and belongings my mom hadn't gotten rid of. But another part of me, that part had aged 10 years in the span of 2. Hardened, cautious, always watching. Dad and I didn't say much in the car. He'd told me to pack a bag and followed through without flinching. No yelling, no dramatic standoff. Just a quiet goodbye to a house that no longer felt like home. The driveway faded into the rearview mirror, and with it, everything I thought family was supposed to mean. We went to a motel that night, a cheap but clean place off the highway. He paid in cash. Didn't even use his rewards card, which I found strange until I realized why. He didn't want Mom to know where we were. He was protecting me now, in his own way. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love. Maybe both. But for the first time in 2 years, I slept in a bed without bars on the windows. The next morning, we went to his sister's place. Aunt Lori. I barely knew her growing up. Mom never liked her, said she was chaotic and too nosy. Funny, considering Lori was the first adult to hug me and say, I'm so sorry, kiddo, like she actually meant it. Dad stayed in her guest room for a while. I got the futon in her home office. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. And for the first time since I was 16, I could breathe. I could go outside without permission. I could take a walk, eat cereal at midnight, use a phone without supervision. It was freedom in the smallest ways, and it felt massive. But the freedom also came with emptiness. I had no job, no high school diploma, just a thin stack of transfer credits from the rehab program that didn't count for much. No friends, no college plans. My entire social life had vanished the moment I'd been taken away. Everyone from my old school had graduated while I was locked up, and I hadn't heard from a single one of them since. Either they believed the rumors, or they didn't know what to say. Or both. Rock bottom doesn't always look like crying in the rain or smashing mirrors. Sometimes it looks like staring at your reflection in a microwave at 3 a.m., wondering if you're ever going to matter to anyone again. Dad tried. I'll give him that. He'd cook breakfast some mornings and leave the last pancake for me, even though he loved pancakes. He'd ask if I wanted to talk. Sometimes I did. Mostly, I didn't know how. I was still angry. At him, at Mom, at Kyle, at myself for not seeing it coming. The real turning point came one afternoon when Aunt Lori came home with a used laptop. It's not much, she said, placing it in front of me. But I figured you might want to. I don't know. Right? Apply for jobs, something. You've got time now. I didn't know what to do with it at first. I opened it, stared at the desktop screen for what felt like an hour. But eventually, I started typing. Not a resume. Not a letter to my parents. Just thoughts. Memories. Fragments of the nightmare I'd lived through. I wrote about the facility, about the sterile white rooms, about Kyle's smug face and my mother's eyes when she called me a liar. It poured out of me like floodwater. Writing became therapy. I didn't care if anyone ever read it. It helped me process what had happened. I started posting anonymously online, on forums, then Reddit, under a throwaway account. The responses shocked me. People didn't just sympathize, they believed me. They were angry for me. Some even shared their own stories of being scapegoated by a sibling, betrayed by a parent, sent away for bad behavior that wasn't real. That sense of connection was like a lifeline. And slowly, something started to shift. I enrolled in a GED program through the local community college. Aunt Lori helped me get a bus pass. Dad paid for the textbooks. It felt weird being older than most of the other students, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I was building something. A future that didn't rely on anyone else's lies. I passed the GED in 6 months. Scored in the top percentile, too. Dad teared up when I showed him the certificate. He didn't say much. He was never good with emotions. but he gave me the longest hug of my life. With that under my belt, I started looking for work. It wasn't glamorous. First job was stocking shelves at a pharmacy, night shifts mostly. Then a stint at a hardware store. I learned how to show up on time, how to manage money, how to not let resentment eat me alive when customers snapped at me like I was nothing. I saved every dime I could. Bought my own used car, a rusty but reliable Honda Civic with a stereo that only played FM radio. That thing felt like a chariot to me. My own keys. My own escape. Meanwhile, Dad's life was unraveling in a different way. The divorce got ugly. Mom tried to paint him as unstable, claimed he was turning against his own family. But the bank statements, those saved us. Not just the ones he found in the attic, but the ones he requested through official channels. Kyle's withdrawals. Kyle's transactions. One even showed him buying concert tickets during the time I was supposedly sick in bed. And the kicker? Surveillance footage. One of the ATMs kept archival footage longer than usual. It took a lawyer and a lot of phone calls, but Dad got a copy. It showed Kyle, clear as day, smiling, wearing the same hoodie he used to borrow from me, pulling cash out like it was Monopoly money. That video became the smoking gun. Dad didn't show it to me right away. When he finally did, it wasn't to rub anything in. It was to let me know I wasn't crazy, that everything I'd said was true. And even then, all I could feel was numbness. Sometimes you get so used to being doubted that proof feels like nothing. Like you spent so long screaming into a void that when someone finally hears you, you're too tired to care. But it mattered. In court, it mattered. Mom's lawyer backpedaled hard once the evidence came out. She tried to claim she didn't know. That Kyle had lied to her, too. But emails between her and Kyle told a different story. Messages about keeping the story straight. About Aaron's therapy being good for him regardless. About protecting our family image. Dad won custody of the house, sold it within the month, split the assets, kept the car, gave Mom what the court demanded and not a cent more. He never screamed at her, never dragged her through the mud, just walked away. And then he came to me with something unexpected. You should decide what happens next, he said one evening. With Kyle, with your mother, whether we press charges. I was floored. Me? I asked. Why me? Because it was your life they ruined. You're the one who lost 2 years. I didn't answer right away. I sat with that question for days. Did I want revenge? Did I want to see Kyle arrested? My mother in court? Did I want them to suffer? I thought I did. God, I thought about it every night. But something inside me had shifted. Not softened exactly. Just refocused. I didn't want to waste another second being defined by them. So I said, let the court decide. I just want to live my life. And I meant it. I kept working, kept saving, got a scholarship to take college classes part-time, started majoring in psychology, of all things. Maybe because I wanted to understand how people could do what they did and still sleep at night. One of my Reddit posts about the rehab facility blew up, went viral, got picked up by a blog, then a podcast. People started reaching out, sharing, connecting. That post became a catalyst, not just for me, but for others. It even caught the attention of a local journalist. They interviewed me, anonymously at first, and did a deep dive on the rehab program. Turns out, I wasn't the only one wrongfully sent there. The facility eventually came under investigation for multiple allegations, falsified reports, abuse, even mismanagement of funds. It was shut down less than a year later. That was the first time I realized I wasn't just rebuilding. I was making noise. And that noise mattered. Kyle eventually dropped out of college. No one knows the full story. Some say he got expelled for cheating. Others say he just stopped showing up. He moved out of state after that. Haven't seen him since. Mom. Well, her reputation didn't survive the divorce. Turns out, when you build your entire social life on pretending to have a perfect family, that image doesn't last long after the truth comes out. She moved in with her sister. Tried reaching out once, through a letter. I never opened it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done giving her power over my peace. Now, years later, I'm 22. I live in a small apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it's mine. I tutor high school students on the side, help them write college essays. Sometimes they ask about my story, why I went into psychology. I just tell them, life teaches you a lot when you're not looking. But recently, something happened that brought it all back. Something I didn't see coming. It started with a knock on my door, and on the other side was someone I never expected to see again. The knock at the door that evening didn't sound urgent, just 2 measured taps. I was in sweatpants, half watching a documentary on human memory for one of my psych classes, a bowl of half-eaten instant noodles in my lap. Nothing about that night felt special. But sometimes life doesn't cue the music or dim the lights when it wants to change everything. Sometimes it just knocks. I opened the door with the chain still on, peeking out through the gap. "Hey," said the figure in the hallway. I froze. My grip on the door tightened. It was Kyle. Older, leaner, unshaven. Dressed in a hoodie that had clearly seen better days, backpack slung low over one shoulder. He looked like someone who'd run out of couches to crash on and was trying to fake confidence through exhaustion. I didn't say anything. I didn't even fully register the emotion that flooded me. Anger, shock, disbelief. It all tangled up in my throat. He held up a hand, like I was a cop and he needed to prove he wasn't armed. "I know. You probably want to slam the door in my face." "Fair." I said nothing. I need 5 minutes. Please." I looked him over. Kyle, the same guy who ruined 2 years of my life with a smirk and a lie. The same guy whose actions fractured our family and almost destroyed me. And now he was standing outside my apartment like a lost dog. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. I unchained the door and opened it. He stepped in slowly, like he expected a trap to spring at any moment. The apartment was dim, quiet, warm. He looked around like he hadn't been indoors in a while. "You live here alone?" "Get to the point," I said. My voice came out colder than I expected. It surprised even me. He nodded and sat on the edge of the futon, my only piece of furniture besides a thrift store bookshelf and the wobbly kitchen table. "I messed up," he said. "I know that doesn't even scratch the surface, but I don't know where else to start." "You think I care about apologies?" I said. "You think I've just been waiting to hear you say my bad, and all this goes away?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I know that. I'm not here for forgiveness." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated, looked down at his hands. "I don't have anyone else. Mom won't return my calls. Her sister kicked me out last week. I've been couch surfing. I was living with a friend, but they found out what happened back then. About the money, the rehab, everything." My heart thumped once. Hard. "How?" "That Reddit post," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The one that blew up?" Someone recognized the details. It went around my old college. Word got out. So he knew. I sat down across from him, folding my arms. "And now you want what, money? A place to stay? A clean slate?" He laughed bitterly. "Man, I don't even want sympathy at this point. I thought maybe if I could talk to you, own up to it, maybe I could start over." I narrowed my eyes. "You think coming clean fixes anything?" "No," he said, voice cracking. "But it's a start." We sat in silence. My mind wasn't sure what to do with him being there. For years, I'd pictured this moment a dozen different ways. Him begging for forgiveness, me slamming the door, maybe even yelling, throwing something, making a scene. But now that it was real, I felt nothing, just calculation. And somewhere in that stillness, I felt the gears start to turn. Because if Kyle was finally cornered, if he had no allies left, then maybe it was time I stopped surviving and started rebuilding something else. Leverage. "I want a full confession," I said finally. "Written. Signed. Every detail." He blinked. "What?" "You heard me. You want to start over? Then tell the truth. Not to me. On paper. Everything you did. How you stole the money. How you framed me. How Mom helped cover it up." He rubbed his face. "Dude, I'm not writing a signed confession like some TV crime drama." "Then get out," I said, standing up. He stayed put, glancing at the door, then back at me. "If I do this, what do I get?" "You get a chance," I said slowly, "not to have your name dragged through court. Because I still have the ATM footage, the emails, the bank statements. I've got enough evidence to make sure you'll never be able to open a checking account without a red flag popping up." Kyle swallowed. "And if I wanted," I added, "I could go public. Not anonymously this time. Full names. Full history. Turn the next Reddit post into a news story. You'll never get hired anywhere decent again. And Mom, she'll go down with you. She's got just as many skeletons." His shoulders slumped. The weight of it hit him. "Finally. I'll write it," he said quietly. "Good." He stayed the night. I didn't offer it. He just never left. I didn't let him sleep in my bed or even on the futon. I gave him a blanket and let him curl up on the floor. In the morning, I handed him a notebook and a pen. "Write," I said. It took him 2 days. Every word was dripping with shame. But he wrote it all. The plan to take the money. The passwords he guessed from Dad's notes. Using my laptop to plant search history. Changing the withdrawal schedule so it looked like I'd spaced out the theft. Mom's involvement. How she found out days after and decided to bury it, afraid it would ruin the family if Kyle got caught. When he handed it to me, his hands were shaking. I meant it, he said. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I'm done lying. I didn't say anything, just took the notebook and locked it in my desk. Now I had a weapon. The next few weeks, I planned. I dug up old files, cross-referenced email headers, printed out texts Mom had sent me while I was locked away, messages that contradicted her claims in court. I contacted the journalist who'd interviewed me anonymously before. I told her I was ready to go public, with names, dates, evidence. She was stunned. Are you sure? This could ruin them. That's the idea. But I didn't want to ruin them with noise. I wanted precision, control. So I made a list. First, the rehabilitation center. Their shutdown had been a small story in the press, but nothing explosive. I'd learned since that several lawsuits had fizzled out due to lack of documentation. I had what they didn't, a paper trail from before I even entered the facility, documenting my protests, my innocence, and now Kyle's confession confirming the setup. That alone could trigger a civil case. Not just for me, but for others still reeling from their experience. Second, Mom. She still lived with her sister, from what I'd heard. Still active in her church and local charity scene, pretending to be a model citizen. I reached out to someone she'd wronged years ago, our old neighbor, Mrs. Halvorson. The one Mom had blamed when her jewelry went missing. Kyle pawned it, by the way. Mrs. Halvorson didn't forget. She agreed to give a statement. Third, Kyle. He was at my mercy now, but I didn't want him to disappear before the story broke. So I let him stay with conditions. No phone. No unsupervised internet access. No contact with Mom. He worked temp jobs during the day and came back to my apartment each night like a kid on probation. Some nights he tried to talk. I let him. I didn't give much back. And the more I watched him, the real him, stripped of smugness and safety, the more I realized something. He was scared. Not of me. Not exactly. But of finally facing something he couldn't lie his way out of. The revenge plan took shape slowly. Not with fire or fury, but with facts. I built a digital archive. Scans of the confession, court transcripts, emails, texts, voice recordings. I reached out to the other kids I'd met at the rehab center, those who'd posted anonymously, those who had similar stories. I started putting together a case. A real one. And just when everything was ready to launch, I got an unexpected message. A lawyer. Not Dad's. A different one. He represented the rehab's former owner. And he offered something shocking. A settlement. Apparently, word had gotten out about the story I was preparing. Someone leaked it, maybe one of the Reddit users, maybe one of the journalist's contacts. The facilities board wanted to keep things quiet. They were offering hush money. A lot of it. I stared at the email for a long time. I could take it. Pay off my school loans. Move. Start over in a real way. Or I could blow it all up. And as I sat there, weighing the offer, I realized something. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about choosing the legacy of my pain. Would I bury it and cash out? Or make sure the world knew what they did? I looked across the room. Kyle was asleep on the floor again, curled up with that same borrowed blanket. For the first time, I didn't see him as the villain in my story. He was just the first domino, and I still had a whole row left to knock down. Kyle left my apartment a few days after writing the confession. Not in handcuffs, not in disgrace, but quiet. Almost like he knew the sentence had already started. He didn't say goodbye, just left a note on the coffee table. Whatever happens next, I earned it. And that was true. The settlement offer from the rehab center's former board had been tempting, absurdly tempting. A six-figure payout in exchange for silence. They wanted me to sign an NDA, bury the story, and move on with my life. It was enough money to pay off my school debt twice over, relocate, start fresh. But something inside me couldn't do it. Because if I took the hush money, they'd get to keep the lie. They'd go on pretending they weren't complicit in ruining lives. That places like that weren't cages with wallpaper and therapy lingo. And worse, Kyle and my mom would keep skating by in silence. No, I emailed the journalist the next morning. I'm ready. Names, dates, files. I'll sign whatever you need. What happened next was like watching a storm brew from the inside out. The article dropped in late October. It was titled The Good Son: How a Teen Was Institutionalized After His Brother Stole $10,000, and What Happened When He Fought Back. It opened with my name, my real name, my face, blurry but visible. Then it broke down the full story, the bank statements, the staged browser history, the confession, the facility's practices, the emotional toll, the broken family, the aftermath. And it didn't stop there. The journalist had done her homework. She'd interviewed other former residents of the rehab center, dug up financial records showing how parents were billed for extended stays that weren't medically necessary. One family had been forced into debt. Another had lost custody of their son temporarily because the facility flagged him as non-compliant and potentially dangerous, a lie based on a refusal to recite a fake apology in group therapy. The story exploded. Within a week, it hit front pages on multiple platforms. The podcast that originally covered my anonymous Reddit post re-released a new episode, with my voice, this time. I told my story in full. Every lie, every betrayal, every second I spent counting down the days on the cement floor of that facility, wondering if anyone would ever believe me again. By the second week, legal teams were reaching out. Not to sue me, but to join forces. A class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of 23 former residents, myself included. I wasn't doing it for money anymore. I had a full scholarship now, offered by a foundation that heard the story and wanted to support me through the rest of my degree. No, this lawsuit wasn't for survival. It was for the kids still stuck in places like that. And then came the fallout. First, the facility. The state opened a full investigation into their operations. 2 former staff members testified under oath that they were instructed to exaggerate behavioral issues to prolong stays. Several documents surfaced showing altered records, residents being marked as violent for things like refusing to make eye contact or asking for their phone. The rehab center was not only shut down permanently, but criminal charges were filed against its former administrators. One was arrested for fraud, another for falsifying medical records. The program director, the one who ran my intake interview, who looked me in the eye and said I needed reprogramming, was barred from working in healthcare ever again. Second, my mother. Her reaction came 2 days after the article broke. A text. Just one line. How could you do this to your own family? I didn't answer. She sent another. And another. Then tried calling. I blocked her. She went to Dad, furious. Tried to spin it as me dragging the family name through the mud. He didn't even let her in the house. From what Aunt Lori told me later, he said, "You dragged your own name through the mud." Erin just held up a mirror. Her reputation? Gone. Her precious image as the perfect suburban martyr? Obliterated. Several people in her community group resigned when they read the article. The nonprofit she volunteered with dropped her from their board, pending clarification. The same woman who once called me a liar to my face now couldn't walk into the grocery store without whispers. She sent one more letter. This time, no accusation. Just a desperate, rambling apology. I thought I was protecting Kyle. I thought you were strong enough to handle it. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't open it either. Third, Kyle. He got fired from his latest job when someone recognized his name. His attempt to apply to another university? Rejected, thanks to the public records now attached to his name in the article that trended for weeks. He vanished from social media. Then one night, he emailed me. Not to ask for forgiveness, not to beg. Just an update. I'm staying with a guy from a halfway house. Working at a warehouse in Oregon. It's hard, but honest. That's all I can do now. I still read your articles sometimes. Reminds me of the line I crossed. I didn't respond. Not to be cruel, but because there was nothing more to say. He wasn't the main villain anymore. He was just another casualty of his own lies. And then, finally, me. I graduated top of my class. The foundation that sponsored my degree asked me to speak at a youth justice summit that summer. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, counselors, educators, policymakers, and told them how easy it is to bury a kid when the wrong person tells the right lie. How systems aren't broken, they're built that way. And how the hardest part of surviving isn't getting out. It's being heard. When I stepped off that stage, a boy around 15 came up to me with his dad. He didn't say much. Just hugged me. Tight. His dad nodded, eyes glassy, and said, "Thank you for saying what he couldn't." That was the moment I realized I'd done the right thing. I'd taken everything they tried to bury me with and built something stronger. Not revenge for its own sake, but justice that echoed. A reminder that even if the world tries to write you off as broken, there's power in picking up the pen yourself. I moved to a new city that fall. Started working with a nonprofit that provides legal aid to teens in crisis. Every time I walk into that office, I think about the day I stood in my kitchen at 16, being accused of something I didn't do, and how no one listened. Now, I make sure someone does. As for my past, it's still with me. Scars don't vanish, but they remind you where not to walk again. And sometimes, just sometimes, they show you where to build your armor. Because when the world tells you your truth doesn't matter, and you prove them wrong, there's no feeling quite like it. I'm Noah. I'm 29, and this is the story of how I finally stopped being the family investment. For as long as I can remember, my parents have had this unspoken rule: you only matter if you're useful, not kind, not supportive, just useful. Growing up, that meant taking on whatever role they needed: babysitter, bookkeeper, janitor. And eventually, when my dad's back gave out and my mom decided she was too burnt out to deal with clients anymore, I became the full-time operator of their family business. Not co-owner, not partner, just the unpaid workhorse with a smile. It started small. Noah, can you update the invoices this weekend? Hey, can you answer a few calls while we're in Palm Springs? That turned into, we've decided to extend our vacation. Can you handle payroll this month? And by the time I was 24, they were living in Cabo for half the year, and I was managing every client, every email, every quarterly report. They told people they were semi-retired. They told me it was a great opportunity, that I was earning my future, that all of this would be mine someday. Except, it wasn't. When I tried to bring up the idea of getting paid, Mom would pivot. We're housing you, aren't we? They let me live in the basement, where the ceiling leaked every spring. When I asked about putting my name on the LLC paperwork, Dad said I needed to prove I could handle the responsibility. After 4 years of running the business solo, I asked about a share of the profits. Mom smiled and said, "You're not motivated by money, right? You're better than that." It wasn't just the business. It was everything. They expected me to take care of repairs around the house, shuttle my sister's kids to and from school, file my brother's taxes, and pick up the slack wherever they dropped the ball. I missed my own college graduation because my parents had booked a last-minute flight to Costa Rica, and someone had to be at the office. I told myself it was temporary, that this would pay off in the long run, that being useful meant being loved. But then Christmas happened. They had planned this big family dinner, lavish as always. My brother, Caleb, flew in from Chicago. My sister brought her third husband. I handled most of the setup, decorated the house, prepped the food with Mom, made sure the driveway was plowed. By now, I'd stopped expecting thanks. I just did it. Dinner started out civil. Wine flowed, stories were shared, and Caleb talked about how exhausted he was from his new startup, a startup Dad had funded with a $70,000 gift a year prior. No one mentioned the fact that I was the one keeping the family business afloat. No one asked how I was doing. And then Mom said it. It came out of nowhere, between bites of honey-glazed ham. She laughed, looked straight at me across the table, and said, "You're almost 30, Noah. It's time to stop leeching." The whole room went quiet. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. Then I waited for her to add a punchline, some kind of joke. But there wasn't one. She just moved on, pouring herself another glass of wine like she hadn't just sucker-punched me in front of the entire family. Caleb chuckled. "Maybe he's hoping for an inheritance," he muttered, not even looking at me. I didn't speak. Not during the rest of dinner. Not during presents. I just sat there, stunned. Stunned at how little they thought of me. How easy it was for them to paint me as the burden when I'd practically given up my 20s for them. Later that night, I was scrolling through my phone in the basement, still in a fog, when a new post from my mom popped up on Instagram. A photo of Caleb outside, grinning beside a brand new Tesla, big red bow on top. "For always being there," the caption read. Always being there? My hands were shaking. I wasn't angry. I was numb. Because in that moment, everything finally clicked. They didn't just fail to appreciate me, they actively resented me. Because I'd made myself too convenient, too dependable, too invisible. That's when I made the decision. I walked upstairs, silent, past the leftover pie and the empty wine glasses. I stepped into Dad's office and turned on the desk lamp. Then I opened the drawer where I'd stashed a flash drive 6 months earlier, just in case. Back when I started quietly preparing for a future they never intended to give me. I logged into the company's systems, admin access, all under my name. Over the next 3 hours, I rerouted every operational account, revoked their logins, transferred ownership of the website, updated the banking information, and ensured every document filed with the state listed me as the sole owner and managing member. I didn't steal anything. I took back what was already mine. When I was done, I placed the flash drive neatly in the middle of Dad's desk. It contained everything they'd need: client rosters, account summaries, standard operating procedures. A parting gift. On the front of the drive, I'd written 3 words in Sharpie: "Good luck without me." Then I packed. Just one suitcase. The essentials. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't make a scene. I just left. Quietly. Deliberately. By morning, I was 6 hours away in a rental apartment near the coast, sipping coffee and watching the tide roll in. I turned off my phone after the 5th missed call, and I didn't look back. The first voicemail came in at 7:12 a.m. It was my mom. Her voice was unusually calm, like she was trying to maintain control for an audience. "Noah, sweetheart, I think there's some sort of technical issue. Dad can't log into the QuickBooks, and the main website says access denied. Can you call us back when you see this?" The second came 15 minutes later. Dad this time. Not calm. Furious. "Noah, what did you do? I can't get into the business account. I just spoke to Peterson. He says the vendor logins are bouncing. I swear to God, if this is some kind of tantrum because of last night." Click. The third voicemail, still Dad, came less than an hour later. Only this time, his voice cracked. "You think this is funny? You think this is revenge? We built this for you. For your future. You owe us." I didn't answer any of them. I sat on the small balcony of my Airbnb, watching waves roll over the sand, laptop open on my lap, and typed out one email. A short, professional message to the top 10 clients letting them know that effective immediately, I was the sole point of contact and managing partner. No drama. No slander. Just facts. The responses started rolling in within the hour. Most of them weren't surprised. A few congratulated me. One even said, "About time." It wasn't until noon that I finally checked social media again, and there it was. A public Facebook post from Mom. "It's always heartbreaking when your own child turns on you. After everything we sacrificed. After everything we gave. You think you know someone." No names. No context. Just vague enough to play the victim. But the comments were gold. Aunt Marla. "Wait, isn't Noah the one who's been running the business? Uncle Greg. Wasn't he living in your basement handling everything while y'all were on vacation last month?" A high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years commented, "Wow, you guys really guilt-tripped the golden goose." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Watching them lose control of the narrative was enough. By the next day, they were spiraling. The calls turned into texts. The texts turned into emails. First, denial. "We can fix this." Then guilt. "Your father's blood pressure's been up since you left." Then threats. "This is our company, and we'll take legal action." They wouldn't. And they knew it. Everything was clean. Documented. All the paper trails led back to me. I'd made sure of it months ago, when I started noticing how Mom was slowly trying to loop Caleb into certain bank accounts, just in case I ever got too demanding. I knew my parents. They never acted out of impulse. Everything was calculation. And I wasn't going to be the fool who waited around for another promise they wouldn't keep. The tipping point came 3 days later. Caleb messaged me. Not a call. Just a casual, smug little text. "Mom and Dad say you've been overreacting. They want to talk. Let's be adults about this." Then, also, FYI, they're thinking about selling the business now. Said I might oversee it. So we should probably coordinate a handoff. I laughed out loud. Actually laughed. This man, who hadn't answered a single client call in his life, who couldn't even remember his own password to TurboTax, wanted to coordinate a handoff. Like I was just a disgruntled temp holding the clipboard. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the system and terminated every remaining shadow login, locked down the servers, rerouted the business email through a new, secure hosting platform, and added a final firewall layer, one that would flag any unfamiliar IP trying to access key files. Just in case. The flash drive I'd left was outdated within 72 hours. What hit hardest, I think, was the silence after that. No more messages. No calls. No social media tantrums. Just quiet. A hollow kind of quiet. I'd expected rage. Maybe even begging. But I underestimated just how much of their identity, how much of their stability depended on me being in the background, quietly propping everything up. Once I stopped playing the part, the show collapsed. And they didn't know how to perform without a stagehand. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with anxiety about missed invoices or juggling 10 roles just to earn a sliver of validation. I wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting off passive-aggressive guilt trips disguised as family bonding. I went for a walk that night. No destination, just the smell of the ocean and the sound of wind in the palms. And I realized something. Maybe they did build something for me, but not the future they claimed. Not the life they dangled like a carrot. They built something better, without even meaning to. They built the resentment I needed to finally walk away. And the story's not over yet. 2 weeks passed. I thought the silence would settle something in me, bring peace. But that's not what it did. It clarified. Because once the noise of their demands stopped, once the emails stopped flooding in, once the phone stopped buzzing with urgent family tasks, there was space to think. Not just think, feel. And what hit me hardest wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief over time I wouldn't get back. Over holidays spent managing spreadsheets instead of making memories. Over the diploma that still sat in a box in my closet because no one came to the ceremony. Over all the times I told myself, this is temporary, just to survive one more guilt trip. I'd built their business. Missed birthdays. Skipped dating. Skipped living. And for what? A Tesla with a bow on it and a caption about Caleb always being there. That line haunted me. Always being there. I had always been there. When the roof leaked and Dad was overseas on a conference, I climbed it in a storm to tarp it. When Mom forgot her client presentation in the Bahamas, I stayed up all night recreating the slide deck. When Caleb forgot to register his business name, I drove across town to file the paperwork under his LLC, my own name never once on a single document. But that didn't count. What counted was appearance. What counted was whoever made them look good on Facebook. Whoever showed up for the photo ops. Whoever said yes without asking for anything back. And that had never been me. Because I didn't know how to play the part. I only knew how to work. How to stay useful. That's the only version of love they taught me to expect. I had no intention of speaking to any of them again. Not for a long time. But life doesn't always ask for your consent. Sometimes it just shows up at your front door. Literally. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard the knock. I'd moved out of the Airbnb and into a small condo closer to town by then, quiet, simple, mine. I was mid-call with a client when I glanced through the peephole. It was my sister, Evelyn. I froze. We hadn't talked in almost a year, not really. She'd sent me a happy birthday text back in July, but it was the generic kind, the kind you copy-paste between meetings. I wasn't mad at her, but we were never close. She'd always picked her spots carefully, staying just enough on everyone's good side without ever getting in the middle. Now she was at my door. I let the call go to voicemail and opened it slowly. She looked frazzled, hair tied back in a loose knot, circles under her eyes, wearing that same Patagonia jacket she'd had since college. I didn't say anything, just waited. She cleared her throat. Hey, I didn't know where else to go. I didn't move. I wasn't sure what she wanted. An update? A lecture? Please call Mom? Instead, she handed me an envelope. I found this in Dad's drawer, she said softly. Figured you should see it. I didn't take it. Not yet. What is it? She hesitated. A loan agreement. In your name. For the business. I blinked. What? Evelyn nodded. They filed it a few years ago. Faked your signature. Used it to take out a line of credit under your name. It's not small. My stomach dropped. I snatched the envelope and opened it. Inside were photocopies, 3 documents, a $70,000 credit line from a private lender, taken out 4 years ago. My name signed in familiar but slightly off handwriting. And tucked in the back, a canceled check from the same fund. Made out to Caleb. I sat down slowly. They hadn't just used me. They'd debt-trapped me. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I could barely speak. My brain was doing the math. Interest. Term length. When the payments were due. What they were counting on that I'd never find out until it was too late. That I'd just keep working. Keep being useful. Until the debt was quietly paid off, and I never even realized it existed. That's why Dad got so quiet after I left. That's why Mom suddenly started playing the victim online. They weren't panicking because I took the business. They were panicking because they still needed me to pay their debt. I looked up at Evelyn. Did you tell them you came here? She shook her head. No, and I won't. I studied her for a moment, then asked the one question I'd been avoiding since the second I walked out. Why are you really here? Her eyes filled, and this time she didn't hide it. Because I'm tired too, Noah. And just like that, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It had company. I didn't forgive her. Not in that moment, but I also didn't send her away. Because now I wasn't just dealing with betrayal, I was dealing with evidence. With leverage. And maybe, just maybe, with the first real ally I'd ever had in that house. And that's where it gets complicated. I didn't sleep that night. The loan document sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. The more I read it, the more furious I became, not just at the amount, but at the audacity. They'd forged my signature, used my name, my credit, my future, all while preaching about sacrifice and throwing Tesla keys to Caleb like candy at a parade. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It was strategy. They knew exactly what they were doing. And now they were stuck. Because I'd taken the business, and the business was the only income stream they had left. That loan? I was technically responsible. If I did nothing, the lenders would come after me. If I went to court, they might get away with it by claiming I'd agreed to it years ago. My parents had always been masters of twisting the truth. But this time, I had evidence. And I had something better than revenge. Control. The next morning, I sat across from Evelyn on my tiny balcony. She looked nervous, still wringing her hands, like she half expected me to yell or throw her out. I didn't. I handed her a mug of black coffee and spoke without raising my voice. I'm going to the lawyer today. She nodded. Do you want me to come? Not yet. But I will ask for a written statement from you. What you found, where you found it, and what you know. She nodded again. Okay. And Evelyn? She looked up. If I do this, there's no halfway. You understand that? I do. She hesitated, then added, they did the same thing to me. Smaller scale. A joint credit card they opened when I was in college. I didn't know until my mortgage application got flagged. My jaw tightened. Of course they did. I met with a lawyer that afternoon, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Deirdre who'd been recommended by one of my old clients. She read the documents, asked a few curt questions, and then said, this is bank fraud. We can sue. We can press charges. It's going to be messy, but winnable. Will it protect my credit? If we're aggressive and fast, you'll need to lock your report down and initiate a fraud investigation immediately. It's going to involve paperwork, depositions, likely a civil case on top of the criminal complaint. And what happens to them? Deirdre's mouth twitched slightly. If the lender decides to pursue charges, they'll be facing felony-level penalties. Prison, depending on how they forge the documents. At the very least, massive financial restitution. I exhaled slowly. I didn't want to send my parents to prison. I didn't want any of this. But I also didn't want to live with the weight of their consequences on my back. I didn't want to spend the next 10 years rebuilding a credit score I never damaged. And I sure didn't want them walking away, hands clean, while I paid for their choices. So I gave Deirdre the green light. The dominoes fell fast. I filed the fraud report. Deirdre sent an official cease and desist to the lender, along with a declaration of forged consent. Evelyn signed an affidavit. By the end of the week, a financial forensics team confirmed the discrepancies in the signature, 3 key points that didn't match any of my legal records. Then Deirdre filed the lawsuit. The moment it went public, the masks came off. Mom called first. Not crying, not begging, screaming. How dare you air this in public? Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family? I put her on speaker and calmly read the statute she'd violated. Forgery with intent to defraud a financial institution, Penal Code 134.3. Carrying a maximum of 10 years and a $100,000 fine. I can send you the PDF. You think this makes you look good? She hissed. Noah, you're tearing this family apart. No, Mom, I said. You did that the moment you used my name like a doormat. She hung up. Caleb called next. His approach was slicker. Fake friendly. Hey, bro, I think we just need to talk this out, you know? Clear the air. Sure. Let's talk about that canceled check in your name from the fraudulent loan. Dead silence. Then he said, I didn't know. They just gave it to me. And you didn't think to ask where 70 grand came from? Click. Dad never called. Instead, he posted a cryptic status on Facebook about betrayal and greedy children. The usual victim spin. Except this time, it didn't land. People weren't buying it anymore. Too many knew the truth. Too many remembered how long I'd been the backbone of their so-called empire. Within 2 weeks, they received the formal summons. I don't know what they said to each other in private. I don't know how they tried to spin it behind closed doors. But I do know that their lawyer reached out with an offer, dropped the charges, and they'd sign over the remaining business assets, issue a formal apology, and pay full restitution, including compensation for the interest damage to my credit report. Deirdre asked me what I wanted to do. And for the first time in my life, I took my time deciding. I thought about pressing charges, thought about watching them stand in court and finally face something they couldn't manipulate. But then I realized I didn't need that anymore. I already won. I owned the business, had full custody of my future. Their social circle had turned cold. The golden child, Caleb, was now a liability. And Evelyn, who'd spent most of her life tiptoeing, was finally speaking freely, telling her own friends what she'd been through. The web they spun was unraveling from every thread. So I settled, not out of mercy, out of power. The agreement was airtight. They repaid the full amount of the loan, transferred the house deed, yes, even the house I once lived in that they claimed was theirs, and signed a legally binding statement acknowledging the forgery, which would protect me from future claims or retaliation. I gave copies to Deirdre, to Evelyn, and to a digital lockbox in case anything happened down the line. Then I blocked them, not with drama, not with a final email, just silence. Because I finally understood something they never taught me. Love isn't loyalty without boundaries. Love isn't sacrifice without return. Love isn't staying just because someone says you owe them. A few months later, on my 30th birthday, I sat on the patio of a little cafe by the water, drinking coffee with Evelyn and 2 friends from college I'd finally reconnected with. Someone asked how I was celebrating. I smiled, reached into my bag, and handed them each a small envelope. Inside was an invite. Grand opening, coastal strategies and solutions. A new kind of business, built from the ashes of the old. Fully mine. They laughed, cheered, and one of them toasted to clean slates. I didn't reply. I just smiled and looked out at the sea. Because I knew in my bones that I wasn't just turning 30. I was finally free. My name's Caleb, I'm 31, and if I had to sum up my relationship with my family in one sentence, it would be useful, but not important. That's been my unofficial title since I was a teenager. The dependable one. The one who could be counted on to fix a leaking faucet, drive someone to the airport at 5 a.m., lend money without asking when it was coming back. The background character, as my younger sister Mia once joked at Thanksgiving. Everyone laughed, even my mom, and I just smiled through it like always. The birthday party wasn't even for me. It was for my brother Ryan, his 35th. He's the golden child. Went into law like Dad always wanted. Got married last year to a woman who refers to our family as classic American with a splash of dysfunction. She thinks that's charming. Ryan's the type who posts his every achievement on LinkedIn and signs family group texts with "Best, Ryan." So when Mom announced she was throwing a small, elegant dinner to celebrate his birthday, I expected the usual passive exclusion. What I didn't expect was the stunt they pulled at the restaurant. It was one of those rooftop places downtown, string lights, overpriced drinks, servers who all look like they just stepped off a Netflix show set. I was the first one there, as usual. I'd called ahead to confirm the reservation, even paid the deposit because I knew how these things go. When the hostess asked if I was with the Wilcox party, I nodded. She raised an eyebrow. "You're early," she said. "Your mother was very specific about the seating arrangement." That should have been my first clue. When the rest of them arrived, Mom, Dad, Ryan, Mia, Uncle Jared, and his new girlfriend, who looked younger than Mia, they all exchanged hugs and air kisses like they were walking onto a red carpet. I stood up to greet them. My mother barely looked at me. "Oh, Caleb," she said with that tight smile she saves for neighbors and store clerks. "Guests sit over there." She motioned with her wine glass to a wobbly chair by the trash can, a good 10 feet away from their pristine circular table. "This table's for family." I blinked. "What? You're fine, honey," she said. "That seat's closer to the bar anyway. You love whiskey, right?" Everyone chuckled, even the server. I stood there, frozen, waiting for anyone to say something. Ryan didn't even make eye contact. He was too busy adjusting his cufflinks. Mia just shrugged. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "It's not like we're sitting on a throne." I sat. What else could I do? I sat in that creaky, unbalanced chair while they toasted to Ryan's success and laughed about inside jokes I was never part of. The waitress came by and asked if I wanted a drink. I ordered water. From my spot, I couldn't even hear what they were saying unless someone laughed loudly enough for the sound to carry. The worst part? I still had the receipt for the deposit in my jacket pocket. I'd put $500 down for this reservation because Mom said she didn't want to put it on her card in case plans changed. As the night went on, the laughter grew louder. The gifts came out. Someone got Ryan a designer watch, another a limited edition pin. I brought a framed photo of the three of us kids at the beach, one of the few times we'd all looked genuinely happy. I'd spent time editing it, cleaning it up, picking out a nice frame. I never even got the chance to give it to him. It stayed tucked under my chair. When dessert came, they brought out a 3-tiered cake with gold leaf accents and sparklers. The server made a whole performance of it. Everyone clapped. Ryan beamed. And then, as the sparklers fizzled out, the same server who'd laughed earlier approached my table with a sleek leather folder. "Here's the bill, sir," she said sweetly. "Whenever you're ready." I opened it. $2,850. I looked at her, then at the table full of laughter and champagne, and finally at my mother. She raised an eyebrow, not even surprised. Almost like she expected this. Almost like this was part of the plan. That's when something inside me shifted. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt done. I stood up, slowly, calmly, and walked over to their table. The music was low, but my voice carried. "You might want to try the family table instead." And then I placed the bill in front of Ryan. He blinked, confused. "What is this?" "It's what being the only son that matters costs," I said, turning to walk away. But I didn't leave. Because what they didn't know was that I hadn't just paid the deposit. I'd booked the cake, arranged the wine pairings, even selected the floral centerpiece that Mom had proudly called tasteful. My card was on file for everything. And I had just enough patience left to see this through the way I always do, quietly, thoroughly, and with receipts. I didn't storm out. That would have been too easy for them. Too forgettable. Instead, I calmly took my seat again, the wobbly chair beside the trash can, and watched the scene unfold like I was watching a play I'd seen rehearsed too many times. Except this time, the script was about to change. Ryan opened the bill and paled. $2,850? Are you kidding me? Mom glanced at it and rolled her eyes. That can't be right. "Oh, it's right," I said, loud enough for the server to hear. "Appetizers, entrees, drinks, custom cake, gratuity included. I booked everything last week. The deposit was $500. You remember that, right, Mom? When you said you didn't want it on your card." Her smile was gone now. "Caleb, this isn't the time." I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. "Seems like the perfect time to me. You wanted me at the guest table? Fine. You wanted me out of the photos, out of the way? Fine. But you don't get to stick me with the bill after freezing me out like I'm a stranger." The table had gone silent. Even Uncle Jared's girlfriend, whose entire contribution to the night had been pouting into her phone, looked up. Mia gave a small laugh, nervous and forced. "Come on, Caleb. You're being dramatic. We thought you didn't mind. You always pay for things." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. "You always pay for things." Said like it was a trait, like it was a character flaw, like it wasn't a choice I'd made out of love, or at least obligation, but something they'd come to expect, like the sun rising or me showing up early. I took a slow breath. "You're right. I do always pay. For birthday dinners, surprise parties, those family emergencies that never seem to end. But not tonight. Not anymore." Ryan cleared his throat. "So what? You're just walking away? You made the reservation. Your card's on file." "I also canceled it about 30 minutes ago," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and tapping a few times. "Called the restaurant manager. Had them reissue the bill to reflect the current tab. It's all on you now. Enjoy the watch, by the way. Must have cost a lot." Ryan looked like he was about to say something, but the server returned then, holding a new copy of the bill and setting it carefully in front of him. "Per the reservation holder's request, we've removed the deposit and associated charges. Total for tonight, starting from arrival, is $2,850. Would you like to split it?" "I'm not paying for this," Ryan said immediately, shoving the folder toward Mom. "This was your idea. You're the one who ordered 2 bottles of wine," she snapped. "And you said it was your treat." Ryan barked. I watched them unravel, voices rising, fingers pointing, excuses stacking on top of one another like a Jenga tower about to collapse. No one even noticed when I stood up and walked back to the table, reached under the chair, and pulled out the small gift bag with the framed photo. For a moment, I held it in my hands. It felt heavier now. Not because of the glass or the wood, but because of the weight of what it represented, proof that once, for a fleeting second, We were a family worth remembering. I walked over and placed it gently in front of Ryan. "Happy birthday," I said, then turned to leave. "Caleb," Mom called behind me, her voice tight. "You're overreacting. You always take things so personally." I didn't look back. I just kept walking toward the elevator, letting the last part hang in the air like a fog I was finally stepping out of. The ride down was silent. But as I exited onto the street and felt the night air hit my face, I smiled for the first time in hours. Not because I'd won anything, but because for once, I hadn't swallowed it. I hadn't played along. I hadn't paid for the privilege of being ignored. I walked a few blocks before pulling out my phone again. I had one last thing to do. Because what they didn't know was that I'd paid for more than just the dinner. The group's rideshare account was linked to my card. Same with the hotel Ryan and his wife were staying at for the weekend, and even the streaming services they all used, just for convenience. I opened the apps one by one, calmly removing my card, canceling what I owned, revoking what I funded. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I wasn't their helper. I wasn't their wallet. I wasn't their invisible brother sitting quietly by the trash can, waiting to be remembered. I was done. It started the next morning. A ping from my banking app let me know that a $278 charge from the hotel had been declined. My card was no longer connected. Then came the Netflix login attempt. Then Spotify. Then Apple Music. I could practically hear Mia's voice in my head. What happened to the family plan? That was the beautiful part of it. Everything had been in my name for so long. No one ever thought to check. They just used it. Quietly. Constantly. By noon, I got the first text. Mom texted, "Hey, something weird is going on with the hotel. They're saying your card isn't working. Did you change something?" No greeting. No apology. Just confusion over the service being interrupted. I didn't respond. 30 minutes later, another message. This time from Ryan. "Our room key stopped working. They're saying the reservation was canceled due to a declined card. Can you fix this?" Fix this. I stared at those two words longer than I should have. For years, that was the subtext of every phone call, every group chat, every guilt trip invitation. Can you fix this? The car battery. The forgotten gift. The surprise bill. The emotional fallout after one of Mom's passive-aggressive jabs went too far and someone ended up in tears. It was always me. The fixer. Not anymore. I turned off my phone and took a walk. There was something liberating about strolling down the quiet side streets while chaos simmered somewhere in a hotel lobby. I imagined Ryan at the front desk, arguing with a tired receptionist. I imagined Mom trying to keep her composure while calling every contact she had at the club. Mia probably didn't even know yet. She'd find out when she got home, and Alexa refused to play her favorite playlist. That evening, I turned my phone back on. 41 messages. 17 missed calls. The group chat was lit up like a Christmas tree. Mia texted, "Why is Hulu asking me to subscribe again? Did someone change the password?" Mom texted, "Caleb, what's going on?" Ryan texted, "This is ridiculous. I just had to put the hotel on my card." Aunt Laura texted, "Hey, sweetie, your mom said something happened with the accounts? Just let me know if you need help getting it sorted." Even Aunt Laura was reaching out now. The same woman who once told me I looked like a substitute teacher when I wore a blazer to a wedding. Still, I said nothing. Then, just as I was getting ready to make dinner, the final call came in, this time from Dad. Now, my dad's not the type to involve himself in family spats. He's a let-them-sort-it-out kind of guy. But when money gets involved, that's when he shows up. I picked up. "Caleb," he said, his voice clipped. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to fix this." There it was again. Fix this. What exactly am I fixing? I asked calmly. "You canceled everything. The hotel. The rides. Your sister says she can't watch anything on her TV. Your mother's losing her mind trying to get in touch with someone at customer service." I stayed quiet. "You've made your point," he added. "Now be an adult and undo whatever it is you did." I let out a breath. "You want me to be an adult? Great. Then treat me like one. Not like a bank. Not like a backup plan. You all made it clear last night where I stand. And guess what? I finally believe you." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him processing, searching for the right response. "You're being dramatic." I laughed. "No, Dad. I was being silent for 30 years. This is me finally raising my voice." And I hung up. A minute later, a new text came through. From Mia. "This isn't like you. Are you okay?" It was the first message that sounded even remotely human. And for a second, I hesitated. Maybe she really didn't know. Maybe she'd just been going along with what the others did, thinking I didn't care. Maybe she thought I liked being left out, that I didn't mind being invisible because I never said anything. But then I remembered her voice at the restaurant, laughing as she said, "It's not like we're sitting on a throne." She knew. They all did. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email. There were more subscriptions to cancel, more accounts to reclaim. I hadn't even touched the shared Amazon Prime or the emergency savings account I'd contributed to for years without ever seeing a dime returned. That was next. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just stepping away from the table. I was flipping it. The next morning, I woke to silence. No new texts. No missed calls. Just the eerie quiet that comes after a storm, but I knew better. That wasn't peace. That was regrouping. I could almost picture them in a family huddle, whispering, scheming, trying to figure out how to handle the situation without actually admitting they caused it. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the street come alive. Somewhere out there, my family was panicking. And I wasn't. At 9:13 a.m., the silence broke. Mom called again. I didn't pick up. Then came a voice message. I hesitated before listening. Her voice always had a way of slipping past my guard, but curiosity won. "Caleb, this is getting out of hand. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you're hurting the entire family." Ryan had to cancel their spa day because the card was declined. Mia missed a deadline because her software subscription got revoked. Your father's blood pressure is up. This isn't you. Be reasonable. I replayed that line, "This isn't you," and laughed bitterly. Of course they'd say that. They'd built their entire comfort on the idea that I was predictable, pliable, endlessly generous. Now that I wasn't, I was acting out. But the part that stung? Not once did she ask why. By noon, I had emails from 2 subscription platforms notifying me that other users had tried and failed to log in multiple times. I changed the passwords for everything, even the digital photo frame I'd bought for Mom last Christmas, the one that automatically uploaded family pictures. I replaced the slideshow with one single image. Me, sitting alone at the rooftop dinner table, framed by the trash can and the edge of someone else's celebration. They saw it, because by 3 p.m., Mia finally cracked. She texted, "Okay, wow. Point taken. You made yourself heard. Can you please stop now?" She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask how I felt. Just asked me to stop. To undo the mess they made the moment I stopped quietly fixing it. So I replied, "When I was 10 and cried because Ryan got a birthday party and I didn't, you told me I was being ungrateful. When I was 17 and bought my own prom suit, Mom said, 'That's what boys do. They take care of things.' When I was 26 and lent you money for your apartment deposit, you said I was being a good son." Me. But when I sat alone beside a trash can at our brother's birthday dinner, you laughed. So no, I'm not stopping. You are. She read it. Didn't reply. But that wasn't the end of it. Around 5 p.m., I got an email from Ryan's wife. Subject line, "Talk." I opened it expecting some polite plea, maybe even an olive branch. Instead, I found a 3-paragraph attempt at a guilt trip masquerading as diplomacy. "Caleb, I know family can be messy, and I know it's not always easy being the one who carries the weight. I've always thought of you as the glue in your family. But glue doesn't make noise. It just holds everything together quietly. I understand you're upset, but publicly airing grievances, especially in ways that affect other people's plans, doesn't help anyone. It just creates bitterness. I hope you'll reconsider before things go too far. Sienna." I stared at that last line, "Before things go too far." Too far. Let me tell you something about glue. It cracks when you dry it out for too long. And I had been dry for years. I didn't respond to her either. Instead, I logged into the Emergency Family Fund, a savings account I'd quietly contributed to since I was 25, under the understanding that it was for all of us in case of something serious. You want to know who never contributed? Ryan. Mia made one deposit 4 years ago and never touched it again. Mom used it twice for unexpected medical bills that turned out to be elective cosmetic work. Dad, he treated it like a backup for the mortgage. It had $18,600 in it. Half of it was mine. And so I transferred my share. Clean. Legal. Documented. Then I closed the account. The next evening, Dad showed up. Unannounced. I was cooking when I saw his car pull up outside. A silver sedan he always kept meticulously clean, but today the back was covered in dust, and the front bumper had a scuff. He knocked once, sharply. I opened the door. His face was drawn, tired in a way I hadn't seen since the recession, when his business took a hit. But this wasn't financial stress. This was pride bruised raw. "I just want to talk," he said. I stepped aside but didn't offer him a seat. He didn't sit anyway, just stood by the counter, looking around like he barely recognized the space. Like this was the first time he was really seeing how I lived. "We messed up," he said finally. I didn't reply. I wanted him to sit with the discomfort. "You've always been the reliable one. Maybe too reliable. We took advantage of that. I won't make excuses." I waited. "But you're blowing this out of proportion," he added. And just like that, whatever fragile respect had crept into the room vanished. "You know what the difference is, Dad?" I said, finally breaking the silence. "When Ryan messes up, you call it growing pains. When Mia lashes out, you say she's just passionate. But when I finally say no, I'm blowing it out of proportion." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "You all pushed me to the edge and acted shocked when I finally stepped back. You froze me out, made me the punchline, and then tried to stick me with the bill, literally and figuratively. And the second I pushed back, suddenly I'm the villain?" He didn't respond, just looked down, like he was counting the tiles on my kitchen floor. "I'm not here to fix things anymore," I said. "I'm not your safety net. I'm not your glue." And then the knock came. Another visitor. I stared through the peephole for a second longer than I needed to. There she was, Mom in her Sunday best, even though it was a Thursday, lips pressed tight like she'd practiced this face in the mirror before knocking. She held a casserole dish like it was a peace offering, as if carbs and cheese could undo decades of being treated like an afterthought. I opened the door, slowly. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, lifting the dish like some sitcom mom trying to diffuse tension with lasagna. "I brought your favorite." She stepped inside without waiting for me to say anything, brushing past Dad like she owned the place. He still stood near the counter, arms crossed now, like he was bracing for impact. Mom placed the casserole on my dining table and turned around, hands clasped in front of her like she was preparing to speak at a PTA meeting. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I said, calmly. "You need to listen." She blinked. "You're angry," she said gently, like I was some child throwing a tantrum. "I get that. But we can't move forward if you're just going to keep punishing everyone." "This isn't punishment," I replied. "It's boundaries. You don't recognize them because I've never had any with you before." "Caleb," Dad cut in, "we get it." "Really?" "We do. That night at the restaurant, it was cruel. We thought you didn't mind, that you preferred staying out of the spotlight." "Why would you think that?" I asked. "Because I didn't complain when I paid for your mortgage? Because I smiled through birthday dinners where I wasn't even mentioned? Because I didn't say anything when you used my savings to bail Mia out of her 5th emergency?" They didn't respond. "I was sitting next to a trash can," I said, my voice rising now, "while you toasted Ryan, clinked glasses, passed around cake. You literally pointed and said, 'Guests sit over there.' And when the bill came, you handed it to me like I was the waiter." Mom's lip trembled for a second, but she held it together. She didn't cry. She never did unless it served a purpose. "Ryan didn't mean to. This isn't about Ryan. It's about you. All of you. The way you've treated me like an extra in your little family show. Like I'm just here to support the plot line, never be part of it." I looked at Dad. "You told me once that being a man meant stepping up, providing. I did that. For years. But I've realized something. Stepping up doesn't mean letting yourself be stepped on." They stood there, frozen. No arguments. No apologies. "From now on," I continued, "I'm done funding your lifestyle. I've removed my card from all the accounts. Hulu, Netflix, the hotel memberships, Amazon Prime, the family phone plan, the emergency fund gone. You'll have to use your own cards now. Your own names. Your own money. You can't just walk away from your family," Mom said, and for the first time, I heard desperation in her voice. "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm walking out of a role you forced me into. That's different." She looked around the apartment like seeing it for the first time, like realizing I had a life she didn't control, a space untouched by their approval or judgment. Dad finally spoke, softly this time. "What do you want, Caleb? Just tell us." It was tempting to give them a list, to lay out every insult, every slight, every moment they dismissed me. But I didn't want vengeance. I wanted recognition. I want you to see me as more than a wallet, more than a helper. I want you to stop pretending that you love me the same when everything you do screams otherwise. I want you to stop acting like I should be grateful for being treated like a guest in my own family." Mom sat down slowly. I didn't realize it got this bad. That's because you never asked. Silence. A long, heavy one. Dad sighed. All right. You've made your point. We'll sort our own bills. You'll get no more texts asking for rides, favors, or cash. But we're still family. That's your choice, I said. But this time, you earn your way back into my life. Not the other way around. They nodded. Not happy. Not defeated. Just aware. For the first time, they left the casserole. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't eat it either. It sat in my fridge for a week like a symbol of everything unsaid, lukewarm, heavy, and layered with guilt. That weekend, I got a text from Mia. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I didn't delete it either. Weeks passed. The family group chat went quiet. I guess they realized I wasn't coming back on command. At first, it was blissful. No passive-aggressive jokes. No backhanded compliments. Just peace. But then something strange happened. One morning, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. From Ryan. Caleb, I don't know if this changes anything, but I need to say it. That night at the restaurant, I knew you looked upset. I saw it. And I did nothing. I thought you were just being you. I realize now I don't even know who you are. I've been coasting on being the favorite for so long that I forgot how much of that came at your expense. You deserved better. I'm sorry. I'll pay you back for the deposit. Don't know how long it'll take, but I'll start. I'm attaching the first $200. Ryan. The check was real. I didn't cash it. Not yet. But I kept it. Maybe one day, I'll forgive them. Maybe not. But either way, I've reclaimed something more valuable than money, my dignity. I'm not the helper anymore. I'm the main character now. And from now on, if they want a seat at my table, they'd better bring more than jokes and expectations. They'd better bring respect. Because the family I was born into might have left me sitting by the trash can. But the one I built? There won't be a trash can in sight. I was 29 when this all started, and for the most part, I thought I had a pretty decent relationship with my family. My name's Anthony, and I've always been the one who kept his head down, worked hard, and stayed out of drama. I was the first in my family to graduate college, bought my own house before 30, and had a good job that I actually enjoyed. My younger sister, Melissa, was the opposite. Every crisis in her life somehow became a family emergency. Lost a job? The family had to pitch in. Got into credit card debt? Mom and Dad bailed her out. Wanted to go on a vacation she couldn't afford? She borrowed from the family account we all contributed to for emergencies. And of course, never paid it back. I tolerated it because it kept the peace. That was kind of my role in the family. The calm one, the fixer, the person who smoothed things over when Melissa and my parents went at each other. But it always left this bitter taste in my mouth, like my stability was being treated as a backup plan for everyone else's mistakes. The whole thing really started when I got promoted earlier this year. It was a big jump, better pay, more responsibility, and the chance to relocate to a different state. I was excited and honestly proud of myself. I'd worked hard for years to get to this point, and it finally felt like all those late nights and skipped vacations were worth it. When I told my parents, they congratulated me, but in this sort of distracted way, like they weren't really listening. And then, about a week later, I got that phone call from Melissa. She didn't even say hello, just launched right in. I lost my job, and you're going to have to help with my mortgage until I get back on my feet. I thought she was joking at first. I actually laughed, which was a mistake, because she got furious. This isn't funny, Anthony. I'm serious. You make way more than me, and I'm not losing my house because you're too selfish to help. I was quiet for a moment, because I could feel my blood pressure spiking. I asked her what happened to her savings, and she snapped that she didn't have any. When I asked why she thought I should be responsible, she said, "Because you're family. That's what family does." I told her flat out that I wasn't paying her mortgage. I couldn't even imagine what she was asking. That was thousands of dollars a month. It wasn't like she needed a short-term loan for groceries or a car repair. She wanted me to take on her bills indefinitely. She hung up on me. Not even an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. "If you don't step up for your sister, you're out of the will." I stared at my phone for a long time. I didn't even know what to say. I hadn't asked for anything from them since I was 18. I'd paid for my own college, bought my own house, built my own career. And now I was being threatened with being cut out of the family because I didn't want to bankroll Melissa's choices. That night, I sat down at my computer and quietly removed my name from every joint account I had with my parents. The emergency fund, the old savings account we'd all chipped into when Grandma passed away, even the shared vacation cabin account that was supposed to be used for family getaways. If I was going to be treated like the villain, I wasn't going to leave my money sitting there for them to drain. By sunrise, I had 37 missed calls and a string of angry texts from every direction. My mom, my dad, Melissa, even my aunt. Some of them were guilt trips, family sticks together, Anthony. Some were threats, you're going to regret this. And a few were just insults. I didn't respond to a single one. That was the first time I really let myself feel angry. Not just annoyed or frustrated, but genuinely, shaking mad angry. It wasn't just about the money. It was the entitlement, the assumption that I existed to solve Melissa's problems, the way my parents acted like I owed her my success. And for the first time in my life, I started to wonder what would happen if I stopped playing my role as the peacemaker. What if I stopped smoothing things over, stopped being the one to give in, stopped being the one who understood? The next family dinner was only a few days away, and I already knew I was going to show up. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. And that's where things really started to get interesting. The family dinner was at my parents' house that Sunday, like always. Normally, I'd be looking forward to the food. My dad makes a mean roast. But this time, the thought of sitting across from Melissa after what she'd said to me made my stomach twist. I spent the drive over rehearsing what I'd say if she brought up the mortgage thing again. But when I got there, it wasn't just a normal dinner. It was an ambush. I walked in and instantly felt the shift in the air. Everyone was already seated, which was weird. Normally, dinner at my parents' house was more of a casual, come and go, help yourself thing. This time, it was like they were waiting for me. Melissa was sitting next to my mom, arms crossed, looking smug in that way she does when she thinks she's about to get what she wants. My dad cleared his throat when I came in, like I was late to some board meeting. "Anthony," he said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Sit down. We need to talk as a family." I sat, but my guard was up. My mom wasted no time. "Melissa's been under a lot of stress, and you laughing at her when she called you for help was completely inappropriate." I kept my voice calm. I didn't laugh at her losing her job. I laughed because she called me and told me I was going to pay her mortgage like it was an order. Melissa jumped in, her voice sharp. "Because you should. You're the only one in this family who can afford it." That was the moment something in me hardened. "No, Melissa. I can afford it because I work for it. And I'm not responsible for your mortgage." My dad leaned forward, his hands folded. "Anthony, you have to understand, she's in a tough spot. Her house is all she has. If she loses it, she'll have nowhere to go." I almost laughed again, not because it was funny, but because the irony was suffocating. She has somewhere to go? She has this house. You've let her move back in before. But that's not really what this is about, is it? This is about the fact that for once, I'm not swooping in to clean up her mess, and nobody here likes it. Melissa's face turned red. "You think you're better than me because you have some fancy job now? Because you bought a house and drive a nice car? You think that makes you special?" That stung, not because it was true, but because I could hear the jealousy dripping from her voice. I took a slow breath. "No, Melissa, I don't think I'm better. I just think I'm tired of being treated like my hard work is some kind of community piggy bank." My mom sighed dramatically. "Anthony, we've always helped each other in this family. When you were in school and needed help with rent." I cut her off. "I never asked you for money. I worked 2 jobs. I slept in my car for a week one semester because I couldn't make rent, and I didn't ask you for a dime." That made them quiet for a moment, but only for a moment. Melissa sniffled, playing up the wounded little sister act. "I just don't know why you hate me so much that you'd watch me lose my house." And that was it. That was the moment the entire script flipped for me. It wasn't that she was asking for help. It was that she was framing my refusal as some kind of cruelty, like I was actively choosing to destroy her life. I felt my jaw clench. "You know what I think?" I said, my voice low. "I think you've gotten so used to everyone bending over backward for you that the second someone says no, you act like it's a personal attack." My dad stood up, his chair scraping the floor. "That's enough, Anthony." But I wasn't done. "No, it's not enough. You all told me I was out of the will if I didn't bail her out. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, then I don't want anything from you anyway. Keep your will. Keep everything. But don't you dare call me selfish for refusing to go broke over someone else's choices." The room went dead silent. My mom looked like I had slapped her. Melissa's eyes were wide, but there was this flicker of triumph there, like she'd finally exposed me as the bad guy. Dinner was awkward after that. No one said much, and I barely touched my food. I could feel all their eyes on me, like they were waiting for me to crack and apologize. But I didn't. When I left, my mom hugged me stiffly and said, "You'll understand someday." I got in my car and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Melissa had that look on her face, the one she got when she didn't get her way but was already scheming about how to make sure she would. And sure enough, the next week, I started getting calls from extended family. My aunt called to tell me that Melissa had been crying on the phone, saying she didn't know how she was going to survive because I abandoned her. My cousin texted me to say he heard I was refusing to help and that it was pretty cold. The narrative was spreading, and I was quickly becoming the villain of the family story. I tried to ignore it at first, but every time my phone buzzed with another judgmental message, I felt this slow burn in my chest. Then came the kicker. Melissa posted on Facebook about how some people would rather watch family lose everything than lend a helping hand, and how she was praying for strength during this difficult time. She didn't name me directly, but she didn't have to. Half the comments were from relatives and family friends, calling me selfish, saying money changes people, and one even suggested that I must have forgotten where I came from. That one hurt the most, because I hadn't forgotten. If anything, I remembered too well. I remembered every time I'd been told to be the bigger person when Melissa took my things without asking. I remembered when I had to skip a school trip because my parents used the savings account I'd been putting my summer job money into to bail her out of some mess. I remembered being told, over and over, that I was the responsible one, like it was some badge of honor, when really, it was just code for the one we can rely on to sacrifice. I realized then that this wasn't just about Melissa's mortgage. It was about years of being expected to give more, do more, be more, and never complain. The next family dinner was coming up, and I already knew what was waiting for me. The guilt trip, the confrontation, the attempts to make me cave. But this time, I wasn't just going to sit there and take it. And I had no idea that the confrontation I was about to walk into would push things past a point we could ever come back from. I showed up to the next family dinner with a knot in my stomach. The last dinner had been tense, but this time, I could tell before I even walked in that something was different. There were too many cars outside my parents' house, my aunt's SUV, my uncle's truck, even my grandmother's old sedan. It wasn't just a regular Sunday dinner. It looked like a summit meeting. When I stepped inside, I could hear voices from the dining room. Low, heated voices. My name was said more than once. I froze in the hallway for a second, listening. "He's being ridiculous," Melissa was saying. "He could pay off the whole mortgage tomorrow and still have money left over. He just doesn't want to help." My dad's voice came next, stern and authoritative. "He's always been stubborn. We just have to make him see reason." My mom added softly, "We can't let Melissa lose her house. It would be humiliating." Humiliating. Not tragic, not devastating. Humiliating. Like this was about their pride more than her roof. I stepped into the room, and conversation stopped dead. My grandmother was there too, sitting at the end of the table like a silent judge. She looked tired, disappointed, even, and my heart sank. My dad gestured to the chair again. "Sit down, Anthony. We need to settle this once and for all." I sat, my pulse loud in my ears. Melissa leaned forward, looking theatrical and pitiful all at once. "I tried everything," she said, like she was giving testimony in court. "I sold my jewelry. I canceled my gym membership. I even stopped ordering takeout. I'm doing my part. But if I don't make this month's payment, they're going to start foreclosure proceedings." She looked right at me. "Do you really want that on your conscience?" I stared at her for a long time. "Melissa, you've had months to get ahead of this. Why didn't you look for a roommate? Why didn't you talk to the bank about refinancing? Why is your first and only solution to call me and tell me it's my responsibility?" Her lip curled. "Because you're family, Anthony. You've always been the one with the good job, the nice things, the safety net. You're just going to sit there and let me lose everything while you go live your perfect little life somewhere else." I could feel the table turning against me. Every pair of eyes focused on me, waiting for me to say the magic words and fix it all. And then my dad dropped the bomb. "We've made a decision," he said, his voice clipped. "Your mother and I went to the bank this week. We took out a line of credit against the cabin property." My stomach dropped. "You what?" "To help Melissa," he said matter-of-factly. To keep her from losing her home. It was the right thing to do. I gripped the edge of the table. The cabin property wasn't just theirs. It was supposed to be ours, mine, Melissa's, and my cousin Jake's, when they passed. It was the one piece of family legacy that hadn't been touched, the one thing we were all told we'd inherit equally someday. You didn't even tell me, I said, my voice flat. Mom bristled. We didn't need your permission. You've made it clear you don't care about this family's problems, so we did what we had to do. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. So let me get this straight. You told me I was out of the will if I didn't help Melissa? I said fine. And your solution was to mortgage part of my inheritance anyway, so she could stay in a house she can't afford. Melissa crossed her arms, smug. It's not your inheritance yet. And when I get back on my feet, I'll pay it back. Like you paid back the emergency fund. I shot back. Like you paid back the car money from 2 years ago? Or the vacation account? Her face went red, and I saw my dad's jaw tighten. That's enough, he said. But it wasn't enough for me. You went behind my back? I said slowly, staring at them. You used something that was supposed to belong to all of us to clean up her mess, and you didn't even bother to ask. You didn't even bother to tell me until it was already done. Grandma cleared her throat, her voice frail but firm. He's right, she said quietly. You should have asked him. That caused a ripple at the table, but my dad brushed it off. We did what was necessary. If Anthony doesn't want to contribute, then we'll move forward without him. Something broke in me then, some last thread holding me to the idea that we were all on the same team. I looked at my sister, who had the audacity to look triumphant, like she had won something. I stood up slowly. You know what? I said, my voice steady. You've made your choice. You've made it clear where I stand in this family. And I hear you, loud and clear. Mom's eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic, Anthony. I turned to her, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from how much I wanted to say everything I'd kept in for years. Dramatic? You mortgaged part of the only thing that ever tied me to this family. And you didn't even hesitate. You've always bent over backward to make sure Melissa never feels the consequences of her actions. And you've always expected me to pick up the slack. Well, congratulations. You don't have to worry about that anymore. I walked out before they could respond. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to drive straight home and never talk to any of them again. Another part of me, the part that had been stepped on, dismissed, and taken advantage of for years, was already thinking of ways to make sure they never did this to me again. By the time I drove away, my mind was racing. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. Done being the good son. Done being the backup plan. Done being quiet while Melissa got away with everything. And as I stared out at the empty highway, I realized something that made my pulse steady. I had more power than they thought. I had access to accounts, documents, even contacts that Melissa and my parents didn't. I knew things about the cabin property, about our family finances, that they'd probably forgotten I knew. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just thinking about defending myself. I was thinking about fighting back. And that thought, that tiny, sharp, electric thought, was the beginning of something much bigger. Because if they were going to treat me like the enemy, maybe it was time I stopped playing nice. Driving home that night, I felt like I was carrying a weight on my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was grief. Grief for the family I thought I had, for the idea that somewhere deep down, we all had each other's backs. I realized that was just a story I'd been telling myself to make it easier to swallow all the small betrayals over the years. This wasn't just about money or a house. This was about trust, and that trust had just been broken in a way that couldn't be fixed with a phone call or a half-hearted apology. When I walked into my house, everything felt too quiet. My living room, usually a sanctuary, felt like a waiting room. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it all. The anger, the sadness, the exhaustion. I must have sat there for hours because at some point, my phone buzzed again. It was a group message from my parents, a long wall of text about how they hoped I'd cool off and come to my senses before I did something I'd regret. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, Melissa sent a separate text with a crying emoji and, "You really hurt me tonight. I don't know how you can live with yourself." I tossed my phone across the couch. I didn't trust myself to respond. That whole week, I kept my head down at work, but I wasn't really present. My coworkers probably thought I was just stressed about the promotion or the upcoming relocation, but the truth was, I was replaying that dinner over and over in my head. The looks on their faces, the smugness in Melissa's eyes, the way my dad said, "We did what was necessary," like that was the end of the discussion. One night, I went for a long walk around the neighborhood just to clear my head. The air was cool, quiet. I thought about how much of my life had been wrapped up in my family, not just holidays and birthdays, but even my decisions. How many times had I chosen to stay close because I didn't want to abandon them? How many times had I agreed to things I didn't want to do just to keep the peace? It hit me then. I wasn't just mad at them. I was mad at myself. Mad for being the dependable one for so long. For thinking that if I was just good enough, responsible enough, reliable enough, they'd treat me as an equal instead of a resource. I went home and dug out an old box from the closet, paperwork I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were copies of the family trust documents, tax forms, and even some of the old cabin property paperwork. I'd kept them when I helped my parents organize their estate planning a few years back. I sat there on the floor, flipping through page after page, remembering how I'd been the one to do most of the work back then, calling the lawyer, setting up the meetings, filing everything properly. And then I noticed something I'd forgotten about. My name was listed as co-trustee in case something happened to my parents. That meant I had certain rights, access to information, the ability to request records. The realization was like a spark in the dark. I wasn't ready to act on it yet, though. First, I had to sit with what had happened. I had to face the fact that I couldn't go back to how things were. The next Sunday, I skipped family dinner. My mom called, left a voicemail saying she hoped I was done sulking. My dad sent a curt text that just said, "We're disappointed in you." Melissa went further. She posted another Facebook update about toxic relatives and fake family. Mutual friends started messaging me, asking if everything was okay. It was humiliating. I stopped checking social media entirely. I muted the family group chat, and then I threw myself into work. If I was going to walk away from my family's expectations, I needed to fully commit to my own life. That meant preparing for the promotion and relocation like nothing else mattered. It was strangely freeing at first. I started working out again, something I hadn't done consistently in years. I stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made plans with friends I hadn't seen in months. Slowly, the heaviness started to lift. But then I got a letter in the mail from the bank, addressed to me because my name was still listed on one of the family accounts. It was a notice about the line of credit my parents had taken out against the cabin. I don't know what it was about holding that piece of paper in my hands, but something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about Melissa's mortgage anymore. This was about them putting our family's future on the line, my future, without even thinking twice. That night, I stayed up late, combing through the paperwork I'd pulled out earlier. I read every clause, every footnote. I started taking notes. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about taking back some control. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Outwardly, I played it cool. When my mom called the next week, I answered politely, said work was busy. I didn't argue when she said Melissa was working so hard to get another job. I even agreed to stop by for dinner the following Sunday, just to smooth things over. But inside, I was already planning. I knew I couldn't undo what they had done, but I could make sure that from now on, they'd think twice before assuming they could use my name, my resources, or my future as a bargaining chip. And if I played this right, I could do it without ever raising my voice again. That was the strangest part of all, realizing that I didn't need to fight them head on. I could simply step back, let them feel the absence of everything I used to do for them, and let them deal with the fallout themselves. The night before that next dinner, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt calm. Calm, and a little dangerous. Because I knew that tomorrow, I wasn't just going back to sit at their table. I was going back to watch, to listen, to see just how far they were willing to push. And if they crossed the line again, well, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. By the time the next Sunday rolled around, something in me had shifted. I wasn't just bracing myself for another round of accusations. I was oddly curious to see what they'd try this time. Instead of dreading dinner, I treated it like a test. What could they possibly say that would hurt me more than what they'd already done? When I walked into my parents' house, the air was different. There was no dramatic silence, no glaring spotlight waiting for me. Everyone was talking in low tones, and Melissa was scrolling on her phone like nothing was wrong. Maybe they thought the last dinner had taught me a lesson. Maybe they thought I'd come crawling back, ready to make amends. I didn't give them that satisfaction. I smiled politely, sat down, and when my mom asked how work was going, I didn't downplay it. I told them about the big project I'd just wrapped, how my boss had praised me in front of the whole department, and how my relocation package had officially been finalized. Melissa looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. "So you're really moving?" "Yep," I said casually, spearing a piece of roast. "End of next month. They're covering everything: movers, temporary housing, even a car stipend." I said it lightly, but I watched her face carefully. There it was, that little twitch of her mouth, the one she gets when someone else has good news she can't compete with. Dad cleared his throat. "That's good, son. But don't forget, you're still listed on some of these accounts and documents. We'll need to go over those before you leave." I smiled. "Oh, I already took care of that. Pulled my name from everything weeks ago." The table went quiet. Melissa's fork clattered against her plate. "You what?" I shrugged, like it was nothing. Didn't seem fair to have my name tied up in things I don't have a say in. Figured it was simpler this way. My mom pursed her lips, but she didn't argue. I think she realized there wasn't much she could say without starting another fight in front of Grandma, who was silently sipping her tea like a queen presiding over court. That was the first night I left feeling good. Not just relieved, but satisfied. For once, I hadn't been dragged into defending myself. I'd simply stated a fact and let them sit with it. Over the next few weeks, my life started to take on this strange, exhilarating momentum. Work was thriving. My boss pulled me aside one morning and said he wanted me to lead an important presentation for a senior client. It was the kind of opportunity that could open even bigger doors for me down the line. I threw myself into preparation. Late nights at the office weren't draining anymore. They felt purposeful. I wasn't just working to stay afloat or to keep the peace at home. I was working for me. I also started getting my financial house in order. I met with a financial advisor, something I'd been putting off for years, and together we went through every account, every asset. By the time we were done, everything was clean, organized, and, most importantly, completely separate from my family's reach. There was something empowering about that process. Every form I signed, every account I moved, felt like cutting one more string that had been tying me down. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with friends. One Friday night, a buddy of mine from college invited me to a small get-together. I almost said no. My old habit was to keep my weekends clear just in case my family needed me. But then I caught myself. There was no just in case anymore. I went, and it was one of the best nights I'd had in years. We laughed until midnight, reminisced about stupid things we'd done in school, and by the end of the night, I realized how much I'd missed feeling like I belonged somewhere without strings attached. Meanwhile, Melissa's situation seemed to be getting worse. I wasn't asking questions, but word had a way of getting back to me through relatives. She hadn't found a new job yet, and apparently she'd missed another mortgage payment. I should have felt bad. A few months earlier, I probably would have. But now, instead of guilt, all I felt was this cold, steady clarity. This was exactly why I'd pulled away. One night, I got an email from the lawyer who'd helped my parents set up the trust years ago. He wanted to schedule a meeting to review the status of the cabin property. Routine stuff, but since I was still listed as a backup trustee, he wanted my signature on a few documents before I moved. That meeting changed everything. Sitting in his office, I learned just how much leverage I still had. Because my parents had mortgaged the property after naming me co-trustee, they technically had to disclose every transaction to me for record keeping. That meant I had full visibility into what they'd done, the amounts, the terms, even the repayment schedule. I left the office with copies of everything, my mind buzzing. This wasn't about revenge, not yet, but it was about information. I suddenly understood just how deep they'd gone into debt to save Melissa's house. And I knew that if things kept going the way they were going to have to make some very hard choices soon. Back at work, my presentation went off without a hitch. The client loved it, and my boss took me out to lunch the next day to thank me personally. "I see big things for you in the next couple of years," he said. "Keep doing what you're doing." I smiled all the way back to my desk. That night, I opened a bottle of wine by myself and sat on the back porch, looking up at the stars. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because my family approved, not because I'd earned their praise, but because I'd chosen it for myself. I was building something that was mine and mine alone. And quietly, In the back of my mind, I started to wonder what it would look like when they finally realized they couldn't control me anymore. Would they get angry? Would they beg? Would they try to manipulate me one last time? Whatever it was, I knew I'd be ready. Because now, I wasn't just surviving the storm. I was learning how to use it. The meeting with the lawyer had been a quiet turning point, but I didn't realize how much until I got home and spread all the paperwork across my kitchen table. I went through every page slowly, highlighting, making notes in the margins, cross-referencing dates and amounts with the copies of the old trust documents I still had. By the end of the night, I knew exactly how much debt my parents had taken on to save Melissa's house, and it wasn't a small number. They'd borrowed more than the remaining value of the cabin property. If they defaulted, the bank could technically force a sale of the cabin, which meant the one piece of our family's legacy that was supposed to be shared equally could be gone entirely. At first, I felt sick. Then, slowly, I started to feel something else: calm determination. This wasn't just about Melissa anymore. This was about the fact that they'd gambled with something that didn't just belong to them. And now, for the first time, I had all the information they probably assumed I didn't. I spent the next few weeks laying groundwork quietly, carefully. The first thing I did was schedule another meeting with the lawyer, this time, just the two of us. I asked him to walk me through exactly what my rights were as co-trustee and what my options were if I wanted to protect my share of the cabin's value. He was surprised at how thorough I wanted to be, but he explained everything. I could request a full accounting of the debt. I could insist on regular updates about payments. And if necessary, I could petition the court to protect my interest if I believed mismanagement was happening. That last part stuck with me. Mismanagement. I didn't say anything to my family yet. I kept showing up to Sunday dinners, kept smiling politely when my mom made little comments about how nice it must be to have money, kept nodding when Melissa gave dramatic updates about how hard it was to find a job in this economy. But privately, I was building a picture. I talked to the bank under the pretense of needing information for estate planning and confirmed the repayment schedule. They were already behind. If they missed one more payment, they'd be in default. Then, almost by accident, I discovered something else. A coworker of mine mentioned offhand that a branch of the company I worked for was opening an office not far from where my parents lived. Not just an office, a major branch, one that was going to be hiring aggressively for administrative, marketing, and support roles. I did some digging. Within a week, I had an email from HR confirming that job postings would go live soon. Good-paying roles, the kind of jobs that Melissa could absolutely apply for if she wanted to. I bookmarked the postings and printed them out. Not to hand to her, not yet. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the best revenge wouldn't be some dramatic confrontation. It wouldn't be yelling or ultimatums. It would be quiet. It would be letting them walk themselves into a corner, letting them feel the pressure build until they were the ones who came to me. And when they did, I wouldn't be empty-handed. I started putting aside even more money, funneling part of every paycheck into a separate account. Not for Melissa, not for them, but for me, for whatever came next. One evening, I got a call from my grandmother. She didn't mention Melissa or the debt at first. She just asked how I was doing, how work was going, how the move was coming along. Then she got quiet and said, "You know, Anthony, I think you were right to stand your ground. Your parents love you, but they've let things get out of hand with your sister." It caught me off guard. She'd been so silent during all those dinners, I assumed she agreed with them. "I just hate seeing the family torn apart like this," she went on. "But you can't be the only one carrying the weight forever. I hope they realize that soon." That phone call lit a spark in me. If Grandma, the one person they all listened to, was quietly on my side, then maybe I wasn't as isolated as they wanted me to feel. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing cracks in their united front. My mom seemed more stressed at dinner, less quick to defend Melissa. My dad was quieter than usual, distracted. Melissa, meanwhile, was still posting cryptic updates online about fake family. But even some of her friends were starting to comment with not-so-subtle hints like, "Have you considered getting a roommate?" Or, "There are plenty of jobs out there if you really look." I didn't say a word, but I did make one more move. I emailed the lawyer again and asked him to draft a formal request for a full financial accounting of the trust. Nothing aggressive, nothing threatening, just an official document requiring my parents to provide proof of every transaction related to the cabin property loan. When I got the email back with a copy of the request, I sat back in my chair and stared at it for a long time. This was it. The first domino. Because I knew the second they opened that letter, they'd realize I wasn't just this stubborn son anymore. I was watching, and I wasn't going to let them gamble with my future again. The night before I sent the request, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and thought about how far things had come. A few months ago, I'd been the peacekeeper, the one who always smoothed things over. Now, I wasn't smoothing anything over. I was setting the table, and I had a feeling the next family dinner was going to be one for the history books. When I finally mailed the formal request for a full financial accounting of the trust, I expected at least a day or two of silence before the fallout began. I was wrong. Less than 24 hours later, my dad called. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice he used when he was trying not to yell. "Anthony," he said, not even a hello first. "What is this letter we just got from the lawyer?" "It's a request for the trust's financial records," I said evenly. "Pretty standard. I'm co-trustee, so I have a right to see them." "You're making this into a legal matter," he snapped. "We're family." "I know we are," I said calmly. "And I'm not contesting anything. I just want to know exactly what was done with the property we all have a stake in." There was silence on the other end. I could almost picture him grinding his teeth. "You didn't have to go through a lawyer," he finally said. "Yes," I said softly, "I did." I could hear his breath catch, just a little. And that was the moment I realized he understood. I wasn't bluffing. The next Sunday, I showed up to dinner dressed in a crisp button-down shirt, clean-shaven, calm as ever. I didn't storm in. I didn't start with accusations. I greeted everyone politely, even Melissa, who looked like she'd swallowed a lemon when she saw me. Dinner was tense. My dad didn't say much. My mom kept giving me this worried look, and Melissa kept tapping her nails on the table like a drumbeat of irritation. Finally, halfway through the meal, my dad spoke. "We got your request. The paperwork's being prepared." I nodded. "Good." Melissa rolled her eyes. "This is so over the top, Anthony. You're acting like we stole from you or something." I set my fork down. "You used a family asset without consulting everyone who had a stake in it. That's not theft, but it is mismanagement." Mom flinched at the word. Dad's jaw tightened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm not here to fight," I continued. "I'm here to make sure that from now on, there's transparency. Every dollar that goes in or out related to the cabin is going to be documented and shared. If payments are late, I'll know. If the bank threatens foreclosure, I'll know. And if I think things are heading in the wrong direction, I'll take steps to protect my share legally." Melissa scoffed. "You drag your own parents to court?" I looked her dead in the eye. "If it meant protecting the one thing Grandma wanted us to have." "Yes." Her mouth snapped shut. There was a long silence. Finally, Grandma spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "He's right. It was wrong not to tell him. This isn't just about you, Melissa." That felt like the first real win in months. I let the silence stretch a little longer before I leaned back and smiled, like we were just having a pleasant conversation. "Oh, and I brought something for you, Melissa." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously as I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed job postings from my company's new branch. I slid them across the table to her. "They're hiring locally. Good pay, good benefits. I even flagged a few roles you'd qualify for. Applications open this week." Her face went red. "You think this is funny?" "Not at all," I said lightly. "I think it's a solution. You get a job, you make your payments, and this stops being a family crisis." She shoved the papers back toward me. "I'm not taking some hand-me-down job you picked out for me." I shrugged and tucked them back in my bag. "That's your choice. But don't say nobody tried to help." And with that, I turned back to my plate and started eating again. The conversation moved on after that, or at least, they tried to move it on. But the dynamic in the room had changed. I wasn't cornered anymore. I wasn't the one defending myself. They were. Over the next few weeks, things got very quiet. I received the full accounting from the lawyer and went over it line by line. Sure enough, they were behind on payments, not by much, but enough that the bank was starting to add fees. I sent a polite, professional email to my parents. "Thank you for providing this documentation. I would like updates every quarter going forward. Please confirm you are on a repayment plan and share details." It was cold, almost businesslike, and that was the point. I wanted them to feel that shift, that they could no longer expect me to just go along silently. A week later, I got an unexpected call from my mom. "Anthony," she said softly, "your father and I have been talking." We realized we should have told you what we were doing before we did it. I didn't rush to fill the silence. We're making the payments, she continued quickly. We don't want you to worry. I'm not worried, I said gently. I'm informed. That's the difference. She was quiet for a moment. Are you still coming to dinner this week? Yes, I said. But you should know, I won't be discussing finances at the table anymore. If there's anything to address, it can go through the lawyer. I could almost hear the relief and frustration mix in her exhale. All right. That Sunday, when I walked in, something was different. Melissa barely made eye contact with me. Dad nodded stiffly but didn't say anything about money. Dinner was almost peaceful. And then, just as we were finishing dessert, Grandma leaned over to me and whispered, I think they're starting to get it. I smiled, because I knew she was right. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about changing the entire way they dealt with me. And it was working. For the first time in years, I left that house without feeling drained. I felt in control, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, one last move that would make sure none of them ever tried to pull something like this again. And I was saving it for the perfect moment. 2 weeks later, the perfect moment I'd been waiting for arrived. It didn't come in the form of some grand family showdown. It came as a polite letter from the bank. The cabin property's line of credit had officially slipped into default. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter for a long time. This was it. The leverage point. The moment when my family's choices had finally run out of road. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head saying, we did what was necessary. I took a deep breath, pulled out my laptop, and drafted an email to the lawyer. It was short and to the point. As co-trustee, I am requesting an emergency meeting to discuss protections for my share of the property. Please advise on steps necessary to prevent forced sale or further encumbrance of the asset without my consent. He responded within the hour, setting a meeting for the following week. I didn't tell my parents in advance. Instead, I showed up at the next Sunday dinner like everything was normal. Melissa looked unusually quiet, her phone face down on the table for once. My mom looked pale, tired. Dad tried to act as though everything was business as usual, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Halfway through dinner, he cleared his throat. Anthony, I assume you saw the notice from the bank. I did, I said evenly. We're working on it, he said quickly. We just need a little more time to get the payments back on schedule. I nodded slowly. That's good to hear. But I think it's time we make some changes. Melissa frowned. What kind of changes? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. As of next week, I'm petitioning the court to separate my share of the cabin property from the trust. It will no longer be tied to the line of credit you took out. Your debt, and any consequences of it, will be yours alone. Mom gasped softly. Dad's face went red. You can't just do that, he said sharply. Yes, I can, I said calmly. I've already spoken with the lawyer. It's within my rights. You used the property without consulting me. I'm making sure that can't happen again. Melissa slammed her fork down. So you're just going to leave us to deal with this by ourselves? I looked at her for a long moment, then said, very softly, yes. The silence that followed was deafening. You're really willing to burn this bridge? Dad asked finally. I shook my head. No, I'm willing to stop letting you set it on fire and expect me to put it out. Mom's eyes were shiny, but she didn't argue. I could tell she wanted to, but something in my tone, or maybe in the way I wasn't shouting, stopped her. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. The job postings from the company's local branch, the repayment schedules, the notices from the bank, all neatly organized. I set the folder on the table. This is everything you need to fix this, I said. Melissa, those job postings are still open. You get a job, you make your payments, you keep your house. Dad, those bank forms include a forbearance application that would buy you 3 more months. I've done the legwork. Whether you use it or not is up to you. I stood up, picked up my jacket, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar weight on my chest as I walked toward the door. At the doorway, I turned back one last time. I love you, I said quietly, but I'm done sacrificing my future to save you from the consequences of your choices. If you want me in your lives, it has to be because you respect me, not because you expect me to fix everything. And then I left. I didn't look back. The next few weeks were strangely quiet. There were no angry texts, no late-night calls, no guilt trips. The lawyer confirmed that my petition had been filed successfully and my share of the cabin was now legally protected. One afternoon, I got a short message from my mom. We're making the payments. Thank you for the information. A week after that, I got a picture from Grandma. Melissa standing in front of a building in business casual clothes, smiling stiffly. First day at the new job, the caption read. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow breath. This wasn't the happy family reunion moment I might have wished for years ago, but it was something better, closure. They weren't going to treat me like the family safety net anymore. They weren't going to gamble with my future. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to learn what it felt like to stand on their own 2 feet. A month later, on my last night in town before relocating, I drove out to the cabin by myself. The sun was setting over the lake, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace standing there. That place was safe now, mine, untouchable, because I'd fought for it. As I locked up and turned to go, I smiled to myself. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving angry or guilty or weighed down by obligation. I was leaving free. And that, more than anything, felt like winning. My name's Ryan, and I'm 33 now, but the story I'm about to tell you happened when I was just 18. Old enough to vote, technically an adult, but still naive enough to believe that family meant safety, that your family wouldn't turn on you for a laugh, that you could be the quiet one and still be seen. I was wrong. Growing up, I was the extra sibling, not the baby. That was my sister Kelsey. Not the golden child. That was my older brother Adam. I was just there, the default helper, the one who stayed quiet so my parents could manage the louder ones. I did chores without being asked, covered for Kelsey when she snuck out, helped Adam with his car payments when he blew his summer job money. My parents praised me with a pat on the back and a, "We don't have to worry about Ryan." I guess that meant they didn't have to think about me either. The road trip was my dad's idea, some last summer together before everyone moves on kind of thing. A loop through the Midwest, visiting national parks, and staying at motels that smelled like old AC units and disappointment. I didn't argue. I even offered to help plan it. I built the itinerary, mapped the route, printed backup directions in case Dad's GPS failed. But when we left, Adam sat in the front seat. Kelsey picked the music. I rode in the back, next to a cooler that leaked all over my bag. Typical. The joke started somewhere in Nebraska. We'd stopped at a gas station, middle of nowhere, dusty town with one blinking light, and a diner that looked like it hadn't updated the menu since the 60s. I went inside to grab water and some snacks. When I came back out, the van was gone. At first, I thought they were just moving it. Or maybe Dad had parked around back. I walked the lot twice, then 3 times. The gas station clerk looked at me funny. "You lose your ride?" she asked, cracking gum between every word. "Just waiting," I mumbled, checking my phone. No messages. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I tried calling. No answer. Eventually, Adam picked up, snickering before hanging up. That was when it sank in. They'd done this on purpose. A prank. Or what they would call a prank. Another call. This time it was Kelsey. "Let's see if you can find your way back, Magellan," she laughed. "Maybe you'll finally grow a personality." They thought it was funny. Character building. My mom later said it was a bonding moment for the rest of us. I sat on the curb outside that gas station for 3 hours before the clerk finally came out and offered me a bottle of orange soda. "You okay, hon?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. They didn't come back. At least not that day. Or the next. When I finally got a ride into the next town with a trucker named Hank, whose silence was more comforting than any of my family's laughter, I used what little cash I had to buy a bus ticket. I didn't go home. I went to a friend's place 3 states away. Slept on his couch. Took a dishwashing job. Told him it was temporary. It wasn't. My phone buzzed nonstop the first week. Then less. Then not at all. When I finally checked voicemail, there was a message from Mom. "It's been 3 days. Enough already. Come back and stop being dramatic." Dramatic. That was the word they always used when I tried to speak up. When I said it hurt to be the afterthought. When I said it felt like I didn't matter unless they needed a ride or a favor. I didn't call them back. I didn't answer the messages. And after a while, they stopped trying. I got a job. Then a second one. Moved into a studio. Went back to school, quietly, online. Built something for myself, piece by piece. No credit cards in Dad's name. No loans co-signed by Mom. No social media. Just distance. Peace. Years passed. I met people who saw me. Not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. I stopped apologizing for existing. And eventually, I stopped looking back. Until last month. I was working late, still do tech support, freelance now, better hours, and my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a flood. One after the other. When I checked, it wasn't just unknown numbers. It was them. Mom. Adam. Kelsey. Even Dad. Texts. Missed calls. Voicemails. A total of 107. And then came the message that froze me in place. Ryan, we need to talk. It's about Grandma. But it wasn't about Grandma. Not really. That was just the excuse. Because when they finally found me, it wasn't grief in their eyes. It was desperation. I didn't respond. Not right away. I sat in the dark with my phone screen glowing against my palm, scrolling through the messages. Some were short. Just call me. Others were more emotional. My mom's were peppered with guilt-wrapped phrases like, "We didn't know you felt that way," and "It was never meant to go that far." Kelsey sent a selfie of her and some kid with the caption, "Your niece wants to meet you," smiley face, like that would erase everything. Adam's was the most direct. "You ghosted your whole family over a joke. Grow up." A joke. 15 years of silence over a joke. I powered off the phone, but I couldn't sleep. All night, my mind churned. Not with regret, but with disbelief. I'd built a life. Quiet, stable, my own. And now the people who tossed me aside like a spare sock had suddenly remembered I existed? Because of Grandma? I wasn't heartless. Grandma had been kind to me when no one else really was. She used to slip me $5 bills, just for being polite. She once told me, in a whisper over mashed potatoes, "You see everything, don't you?" I never forgot that. So yeah, the thought of her being gone hit me in the chest. But I also knew my family. Knew how they operated. Emotion was just a means to an end. Guilt was currency. And I had a feeling they were cashing in. I waited a week. During that time, I kept a burner phone nearby and started collecting threats. Quiet inquiries. A few searches. A LinkedIn visit here. A Facebook scroll there. I didn't post or respond, just observed. It didn't take long to piece it together. Grandma had passed. 3 months ago. They didn't tell me then. No, the 107 calls started after the reading of the will. And I was in it. Heavily. Grandma had left me her house. A paid-off little place in the suburbs I remembered visiting only twice as a kid. Once during a thunderstorm. Once at Christmas when she made peppermint cocoa from scratch. She'd also left me her savings, apparently. Nothing massive, but enough. More than enough to turn heads. More than enough to cause 107 missed calls. I wasn't just the estranged one anymore. I was the inconvenient legal owner of something they wanted. And if I knew my family, they'd show up smiling, pretending they'd miss me. That we were all just kids back then, and I should let bygones be bygones. So I made a plan. I didn't answer their calls. But I called the estate attorney. Confirmed everything. Updated my address. Verified the deed transfer. I booked a flight to the city where I was now, somehow, a property owner. And then I did something that startled even me. I went home. Not to their home. I never had one there. But to Grandma's. The house was small, clean, and smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Her belongings were still intact, boxed neatly by the corners, probably by them, before they realized they couldn't sell it without me. Her photos were all still there. Except mine. Not a single one. Just Adam's graduation, Kelsey's prom, family barbecues I was never invited to. I recognized the backdrop of one from the road trip. The trip that ended without me. I stood in that living room for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and got to work. Changed the locks. Filed a change of mailing address. I wasn't sure what I'd do with the house yet. Sell it? Rent it? Maybe move in for a while, just to breathe air untainted by obligation. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered. There was a pause, as if she couldn't quite believe I'd picked up. "Ryan?" she asked, cautiously. I didn't reply. We didn't know you were coming back. We thought you were still angry. Still. As if anger had a shelf life. As if 15 years could dissolve betrayal into water under the bridge. "I came to see the house," I said flatly. "You could have told us," she replied, her voice rising slightly. "We were planning to stop by this week. Talk things through. Maybe come to some kind of agreement." Agreement. There it was. It wasn't about Grandma. It wasn't about grief. It was about assets. "I already spoke to the attorney," I said. Her voice sharpened. "Ryan, don't be difficult. You're not the only grandchild. Adam and Kelsey didn't get left anything," I cut in. "And I think we both know why." Silence. Then, just above a whisper, she said, "You can't seriously be planning to keep the house." "I can. And I am." Another beat of silence. Then, you owe us more than this. That was when the shift happened. Inside me. Because no matter how much time passed, no matter how many jobs I held or degrees I earned or friends I made, they would always see me as the placeholder. The background character. The one they could leave behind and still sleep soundly. I owe you nothing, I said. Then I hung up. The next call came 20 minutes later. This time, it was Adam. I didn't answer. Then Kelsey. Then Mom again. I watched the missed calls rack up. 108, 109, 112, and then came the knock on the door. The knock wasn't aggressive. It was measured, like someone trying really hard to sound calm, controlled, normal. But I'd grown up in that chaos. I knew exactly what false cheer sounded like. I stood in the hallway just past the kitchen, staring at the front door like it was a relic from a different lifetime. A version of me, maybe the teenage Ryan they left at the gas station, might have run to it, might have opened it with a nervous smile, hoping they were sorry. But that Ryan was gone. I waited another knock or two before I stepped forward and opened it, just enough for the screen door to hold the line. Standing outside were all three of them, Adam in his usual smug business casual, sleeves rolled up like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Kelsey, clutching her oversized purse and a Starbucks drink she hadn't finished. And my mom, who looked like she'd dressed up for a church she hadn't believed in for years. Ryan, she said with a breathy smile, like we just bumped into each other at the grocery store. Adam chimed in, there he is. I didn't say anything. We just wanted to talk, Mom continued, glancing around the porch like she was worried the neighbors might hear. Clear the air. You left so suddenly after everything. You mean after you left me? I said, still holding the screen door shut. Adam sighed, rubbing his temple like I was being exhausting. Look, man, we were kids. It was a stupid joke. We were just messing around. You were 19, I said, and I wasn't in on the joke. Kelsey leaned in. We said we were sorry. No, I replied. You said I was dramatic. That's not an apology. Her smile flickered. So what? You're gonna just cut us out of everything? Because of something that happened 15 years ago? I raised an eyebrow. You mean like when you cut me out of every holiday, every birthday, every family update? Like that. Mom's voice wavered. We didn't know how to reach you. You had no problem finding me when Grandma's will came through. That hit. I saw it in her eyes. In the tight pinch of Adam's jaw. In the way Kelsey suddenly found the edge of her cup very interesting. You know Grandma would have wanted us to stick together, Mom said gently, softening her tone. She always loved having us all under one roof. She left this house to me, I said plainly. That was her final word. Adam stepped forward, hand casually on the screen handle. Come on, man. You don't even live here. You're not planning to stay, right? You could sign it over. We could sell it, split it. Make it fair. Fair. I almost laughed. Fair. Like fairness had ever factored into anything they did. Like fairness was part of stranding your youngest sibling in the middle of Nebraska to teach him a lesson. I think I'm going to hold on to it for now, I said. Kelsey groaned. Are you serious? You haven't even been here in years. This isn't your home. I looked around the small porch. The wind chimes I remembered from my childhood visits still hung from the eave, faded and clinking softly. The rose bushes she'd planted were blooming pink and overgrown, wild in their beauty. I looked back at my sister and said, maybe not. But it's not yours either. Adam lost the pretense then. You're making a mistake. If you do this, don't expect any of us to be there when you change your mind. Noted, I said, and began to close the door. But my mom stopped it with her hand. Ryan, she said, eyes narrowing now, don't throw away your family over a house. I leaned against the frame. You already threw me away. This is just the first time you've realized it might cost you something. She stared at me, her hand still pressed to the door frame, her nails perfectly manicured like always. Then, with a sharp breath, she stepped back. Adam turned without another word. Kelsey lingered, like she wanted to say something clever, but couldn't find the right tone. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar wash over me. Power. They weren't in control anymore. They couldn't guilt me. They couldn't gaslight me into thinking I was too sensitive, too silent, too forgettable. I'd been silent, but I'd never forgotten. Later that evening, I walked through the house, room by room. I found Grandma's old letters, tied in string, her recipes in the drawer. A photo I didn't expect, in the back of a worn album of me and her on that Christmas visit. Just the two of us, laughing over cocoa. She hadn't forgotten me either. That night, I made tea in her old kettle, sat in her chair by the window, and let the quiet settle. Then my phone buzzed again. A new number. A voicemail. When I played it, Adam's voice came through. You think you've won something? You don't even know what you're holding. You think Grandma left it to you out of love? Keep digging, little brother. You'll wish you never did. The message ended, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something close to fear. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Grandma's old chair, the one with the cushion that had molded to her frame over years of crosswords and Sunday morning coffee, and listened to that voicemail on loop. You don't even know what you're holding. That line got under my skin. It wasn't just spite. There was something in Adam's voice, tight, bitter, a little panicked. It didn't sound like a bluff. He was angry, yes, but also threatened. And that was new. Adam had never once looked at me as anything more than an underfoot inconvenience. Whatever Grandma left me, it wasn't just the house. The next morning, I pulled out the boxes they'd packed up and left in the corner of the living room. Neatly labeled. Books, photos, kitchen. The usual. I dug through them carefully, opening every envelope, flipping through every notebook. It was halfway through a box marked linens, towels, old blankets, a pair of slippers still in their packaging, that I found something strange. It was a flat, black notebook, sandwiched between folded sheets. At first glance, it looked like a plain ledger. But when I flipped it open, the first page was addressed directly to me. Ryan, if you're reading this, then you've come home, and I hope you're safe. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anyone. But you were always the one who paid attention. That's why I'm leaving this to you. My hands tightened around the edge of the paper. The next few pages laid out something I never expected. Grandma had been quietly investing for decades, stocks, real estate, some small startups before they took off. She'd never talked about it, kept everything under the radar. She mentioned it once, apparently, to my mom, who shrugged it off as old lady delusions. But she hadn't been delusional. Far from it. She was worth a lot. The house wasn't just a sentimental gift, it was the key to the entire portfolio. The deed came with full rights to several trust accounts, all linked through a shell company Grandma had set up in her early 60s. And the beneficiary of it all? Me. Not my mom. Not Adam. Not Kelsey. Just me. There were instructions. Passcodes. A safety deposit box number. A second key taped under the back cover of the notebook. I sat back in the chair and laughed, once, soft and disbelieving. Not because I found it funny, but because it finally made sense. The desperation in their voices. The timing of the calls. The visit. The threats. They didn't want the house. They wanted everything tied to it. Later that week, I took a trip downtown to the bank listed in the notebook. The deposit box was real. Inside, I found original documents. Stock certificates. A thumb drive. And a sealed envelope with my name on it, in Grandma's careful, looping handwriting. I waited until I got back to the house to open it. My dear boy, I don't know where life took you. But if you're reading this, I trust you found your way. I always knew you would. I saw how they treated you, and it broke my heart. But I also knew someday they'd need you more than you needed them. I built this for you because I believed in you when no one else did. Do what you want with it. Build something. Start fresh. Or just breathe without them pulling at you. You've earned that. And remember, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's strategy. Love always, Grandma, I cried. For the first time in years, I really cried. Not just for the years I'd lost, but for the simple, quiet truth that someone had seen me, had loved me without conditions or demands, and had trusted me enough to leave it all in my hands. The next day, I contacted the estate lawyer again. Not to sell, not to cash out, but to transfer everything carefully, smartly into a new trust. One under a different name. One that couldn't be traced back to the family unless I wanted it to be. I started moving pieces, setting up protections, making sure they couldn't touch a cent without going through me. And then I invited them back. It was a Saturday when they showed up. Same lineup. Mom, Adam, Kelsey. They looked tired, worn down. I could see the rehearsed apologies waiting in their throats. This time, I opened the door wide and motioned them inside. They stepped in like they belonged there. Like they still thought there was a version of this where we all hugged and made up, and I handed over the keys. I didn't offer drinks. I didn't ask how they'd been. I sat across from them in Grandma's kitchen, notebook in front of me, and let the silence stretch long enough for them to sweat. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. We're glad you called. It's been a lot. Losing her. Thinking about everything that's happened between us. I nodded. It has. Adam leaned forward, folding his hands. So, we heard some things. About the trust. About the house. And we figured, maybe we could come to some kind of agreement. Kelsey, always the opportunist, jumped in. You've always been the smart one. No one's saying you don't deserve something. But it was Grandma. She loved all of us. She wouldn't want us divided. I looked at them, calm and steady. She didn't leave anything to you, I said. Mom flinched. She made a mistake. I shook my head. No. She made a choice. Adam's tone turned hard. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I've always been better than how you treated me. Kelsey rolled her eyes. So what? You're just going to cut us off? Over something that happened 15 years ago? I was 18, I replied. You left me at a gas station and drove away laughing. I slept in a stranger's truck that night. I ate crackers for dinner. I could have vanished and none of you would have known for weeks. You abandoned me. That's not a prank. That's not a phase. That's the line you drew. I just finally decided to honor it. Mom's lip trembled. Ryan, please. No, I said firmly. This is how it ends. I stood up, took the notebook and the envelope, walked them to the door. Whatever you thought you'd get from this house, let it go. It's done. Adam clenched his fists. You'll regret this. I smiled. No, you will. Because for once in your life, you can't lie, manipulate, or guilt your way out of the truth. You're just going to have to live with it. I closed the door behind them. And this time, no one knocked again. In the months that followed, I stayed in the house, fixed it up, started working from the home office I built in what used to be Grandma's sewing room. I started dating again, found peace in small things, watering her roses, playing music on her old stereo, reading her cookbooks. And sometimes, I'd find another note she left behind, tucked in a drawer, scrawled in the margins of a crossword, written in the back of a photo album. She'd planned this. All of it. She saw them for what they were. And she saw me for what I could become. I wasn't the forgotten one anymore. I was the heir. Not to a fortune. To freedom. If I had to sum up my relationship with my sister in one sentence, it would be this. She's the kind of person who'll smile at you sweetly, then pull the chair out from under you just to watch you fall, and somehow convince everyone it was your fault for not sitting properly. My name's Kyle. I'm 38, and I've never been the confrontational type. I'm the classic let it slide guy. The one who picks his battles so carefully, people forget I've got any fight in me at all. But I remember every dig, every backhanded comment, every time I was told to stop overreacting when I knew, deep down, I wasn't. My sister, Lauren, is 41. A picture-perfect suburban mom with a white smile, matching Christmas pajamas, and a social media presence so carefully curated you'd think her life was one long Pottery Barn commercial. But behind all that, she's sharp, strategic, and honestly, kind of a jerk when she thinks no one's watching. The thing is, family gatherings always bring out the worst in her. Or maybe it just brings out the real her. Growing up, she was the golden child. Straight A student, head cheerleader, prom queen. You get the idea. I was the quiet younger brother who liked art, didn't care much for sports, and preferred reading to shouting over who got the front seat. Our parents never said it out loud, but the favoritism was baked into everything. When Lauren got into a minor car accident, she was stressed from school. When I scraped someone's bumper in college, I was careless and irresponsible. Her mistakes were forgivable. Mine were character flaws. I didn't realize how deep those patterns ran until after Dad passed away. He was the glue, rough around the edges, but he kept the peace. Once he was gone, it was like the thin sheet covering the rot just got ripped off. Suddenly, every dinner was a power play. Every invitation came with conditions. And every time I thought we were finally getting along, she'd do something small and petty to remind me where I stood. But I dealt with it. I always dealt with it. Especially for my son, Ben. Ben's 12 now, and he's everything to me. Smart, funny kind. His mom and I divorced 5 years ago. Amicably, thankfully. And I've had full custody since she moved abroad for work. I never thought being a single dad would come naturally, but it does. Or maybe it's just that he makes it easy to try. He's the kind of kid who'll hold the door for strangers, say please, without needing a reminder, and write thank you cards after birthday parties without me nagging. I don't know how I got lucky, but I did. Anyway, a few months back, Lauren invited us to celebrate her twin's birthday at a nice place downtown. Her words, nothing too fancy, she texted, but we're something decent. They've got a dress code. That should have been my first clue. Lauren doesn't do nothing too fancy. I knew she picked that restaurant to impress her friends, probably even to show off a little. But it was for the twins, and Ben liked hanging out with his cousins, so I said yes. I even went out and bought him a new button-down and myself a proper dress shirt, because the last thing I wanted was to show up and be silently judged. The day of the dinner, traffic was brutal. We were only 5 minutes late, but I still apologized as we walked in. The hostess gave me a polite smile and gestured toward the private dining section. It was all glass-walled and dimly lit, with elegant hanging lights and waiters in actual tuxedo vests. Ben's eyes widened. "This place is awesome," he whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Can I order steak?" "Whatever you want, bud," I grinned. We followed the hostess down the hall, and I spotted the group right away. Lauren and her husband, Paul, were already seated at a long table with their twins and another couple I didn't recognize. For kids, for adults. 8 seats total. Except, only 4 were actually occupied. The rest had neatly folded napkins, menus, and little place cards with names. I slowed slightly, confused. My name wasn't on any of the cards. Before I could say anything, Lauren glanced up and smiled with that faux surprised look she's mastered over the years. "Oh, Kyle," she said, like she hadn't seen me walk in. "I thought I told you we only reserved for 8. I blinked. "I didn't know I needed to RSVP. You said to come." "I did say that," she agreed, voice sugar sweet. "But we had to finalize the guest list for the private room. It's limited seating, and with the twins' friends and their parents." She gestured vaguely toward the table. "There's only room for 4. I looked around. No staff bringing extra chairs. No one making space. Just 8 seats, prearranged, like a wedding rehearsal dinner. Ben stood awkwardly beside me, glancing up with that polite, anxious smile kids get when they know something's off but don't want to make a scene. Paul leaned back in his chair and sipped from a wine glass. "You really should have called ahead, man." I felt heat rise in my face, but I swallowed it down. "Got it," I said quietly. I could have argued. Could have called them out right there. But I didn't. Something in the air told me this wasn't just a miscommunication. It was intentional. A message. I smiled tightly, put a hand on Ben's shoulder, and steered him toward the other side of the restaurant. The hostess, bless her heart, noticed us wandering and asked if we needed help. I gave her a brief rundown and asked, as casually as I could, if there was any open seating available, something private, if possible. She hesitated for a second, then smiled and said, "Let me check with the manager." And that's how I met Steve. Steve, the restaurant manager, was maybe in his late 50s, silver hair, sharp suit, and the kind of presence that makes you instantly feel like you're talking to the person in charge. I explained what happened, without bitterness, just facts, and his eyebrows furrowed. "They didn't reserve spots for you and your son, even though you were invited?" "Apparently there's only room for 4, I said, throwing up air quotes. Steve gave me a long look, then nodded once. "Give me 5 minutes." 10 minutes later, Ben and I were seated at a stunning booth on the opposite side of the restaurant. Plush leather seating, fireplace view, and a waiter who introduced himself like we were royalty. I wasn't sure what Steve did behind the scenes, but it was clear we were being taken care of. I kept my cool. I didn't go back to Lauren's table. Didn't make a scene, but I could see her across the glass divider. Every time she looked up and saw me smiling, chatting with Steve, or laughing with Ben, her face tightened just a little more. And then came the moment that shifted everything. The waiter returned and said, "Mr. Kyle, the manager wanted you to know everything has been arranged as discussed." Ben looked up at me, confused. "What did you arrange?" I just smiled, because that was the moment I decided this wouldn't end the way Lauren expected. This wouldn't be another story where Kyle quietly takes the hit, makes excuses, and shrinks into the background. No, this time, I had a plan. And by the time dessert arrived, it would all come together. Ben was sipping his lemonade through one of those fancy metal straws when I saw Lauren lean over and whisper something to Paul. He looked in our direction, then snorted into his wine. One of the twins, Noah, I think, craned his neck to look over at us too, before getting gently redirected by his mom. The whole thing played out like a pantomime. Subtle enough for plausible deniability, but pointed enough that it was clearly meant to sting. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled and gave a little wave across the room, like we were old friends catching up from afar. Steve, the manager, happened to walk by again and noticed. "Everything still good here?" he asked, glancing toward the other table with a flicker of curiosity. "Perfect," I said. "Better than expected, honestly." Ben grinned. Dad, can I get the steak and mac and cheese? Go for it, I nodded. We're celebrating. He tilted his head. What are we celebrating? I just smiled at him. That we're not sitting over there. It would have been easier to brush the whole thing off, chalk it up to Lauren being Lauren, and let it slide like I always had. But something had shifted. Maybe it was how Ben looked at me, uncertain and trying to be strong. Or maybe it was how comfortable Lauren seemed, throwing her weight around and humiliating me in front of my kid. She always knew how to walk that razor-thin line. Just petty enough to make you second-guess your own anger. Just subtle enough that blowing up would make you look like the problem. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This time, she didn't just nudge the chair out from under me. She pulled it out from under my son, too. And I wasn't going to let that slide. Dinner was delicious. I let Ben order whatever he wanted. The waiter, Michael, kept our drinks full and our plates warm. Halfway through our meal, Steve swung by again and told me that if we wanted dessert, he had something special in mind. I told him we'd love that. I could see Lauren's table from the reflection in the glass behind Ben's seat. Their side was lively, but every few minutes, she would glance over, probably wondering what we were talking about, what we were laughing at, what exactly I'd said to the manager. But the breaking point didn't come until the cake. Apparently, Lauren had arranged for a giant shared dessert to be brought out to her table for the twins, a sparkler-topped volcano of fudge and brownies. The kind of thing kids lose their minds over. As the waiter rolled it out, music playing, sparklers fizzing, the kids clapped and screamed. The spectacle pulled the entire restaurant's attention toward her table. Ben turned to watch and smiled. That looks cool. It does, I said. Then, from across the room, Lauren raised a champagne glass toward us and mouthed, "You missed out." Subtle, polished, and absolutely infuriating. I nodded. Not in anger, not in defeat, just acknowledgement. But that's when it hit me. This wasn't just some casual slight. This whole thing had been planned. Lauren had never intended for us to be part of the dinner. The private room, the reserved seating, the spectacle, all of it was curated. It was a statement, a flex. She wanted to show her friends that she was the star, that she could ice out her own brother and still look gracious doing it, that she could exclude family without guilt, because in her world, appearances were everything. And I knew that at some point, she'd try to make me look like the ungrateful one. Steve came by again just as they were finishing up their cake. "Everything still to your liking?" he asked. "Couldn't be better," I said. "Hey, do you guys do custom desserts for events?" He raised an eyebrow. "We do. Want me to send over a menu?" I hesitated. Then I leaned in slightly. "Actually, how hard would it be to make a duplicate of that dessert?" I pointed subtly toward Lauren's table. "Only bigger." Steve tilted his head. "Bigger. Same base. But triple it. Make it theatrical. I'll cover it." He gave me a sly grin. "I'll see what I can do." And with that, the stage was set. I thought that was the end of it, the little finale. A quiet flex of my own, delivered with a smile and a polite tone. I didn't need to be petty. I didn't need to raise my voice or make a scene. I just wanted Lauren to feel what she made us feel. But then something happened that turned the night on its head. Ben had excused himself to go to the restroom, and I was scrolling through my phone when a shadow passed by our table. I looked up and saw Paul standing there, wine glass in hand, that permanent smirk on his face. "Didn't think we'd see you here," he said. I blinked. "You mean after you told me there were no seats for us?" He laughed like we were sharing a joke. "Come on, man. It's not that deep. You know how Lauren gets with party planning. She's got that whole guest list system. It's just numbers. Right?" I said, not taking the bait. "Just numbers." "You could have said something, though," he added, tilting his glass. "Could have asked for a chair or whatever. Nobody was trying to snub you." I stared at him. "You told me I should have called ahead." Paul shrugged. "Well, yeah. I mean, if you really wanted to sit with us, you would have made sure, right?" I had to bite my tongue. Ben returned to the table, pausing when he saw Paul standing there. "Hi, Uncle Paul." Paul gave him a nod. "Hey, kiddo." Then he turned back to me and lowered his voice, just enough so only I could hear. "Look, I know you don't always feel included, but it's not personal. Lauren just doesn't like chaos. You and Ben, you're kind of unpredictable." I blinked. "Unpredictable? Not in a bad way," he rushed to clarify. "Just, not part of the routine. She works hard to make things nice. Maybe next time, just check in before showing up." That word again, check in. Like I was some outsider. A guest. Someone who needed permission to be with family. I stood slowly. Thanks for stopping by, Paul. I think our dessert's about to arrive. He gave me a little shrug, then turned and wandered back to their table. As he sat down, Lauren looked over and said something to him. He whispered back, and she laughed. And then I felt it. That deep, sharp snap of something finally breaking loose. It wasn't about dinner. It wasn't even about the table. It was about the years of being the fallback. The invisible sibling. The extra seat that only mattered if someone else canceled. I remembered the holidays where our gifts were always last-minute afterthoughts. The birthday where she forgot Ben's name on the card. The time she invited the whole family to her beach house except us, and said it was just a logistics thing. I remembered all of it. And for once, I wasn't going to swallow it down. The waiter returned, wheeling in a cart so large it took 2 staff members to navigate it. On top of it was a 3-tiered dessert monstrosity, molten lava cake, brownie towers, ice cream scoops balanced with chocolate shards, caramel drizzle, strawberries dipped in gold flakes, actual gold flakes. And on the top, a tiny fondant plaque that read, "To the best dad and the coolest kid." Ben's eyes nearly popped out of his head. The entire restaurant gasped audibly. Phones came out. People started clapping. The waiter lit a line of sparklers around the base, and it looked like something out of a Vegas show. Across the room, Lauren's face froze. Steve reappeared like magic and clapped me on the back. "Enjoy, gentlemen. It's on the house." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He smiled. "Your story kind of stuck with me. And honestly, it's nice seeing someone treat their kid right. Consider it a manager's privilege." I was stunned. Ben dug in, giggling, chocolate smeared across his cheek. "Dad, this is awesome." I laughed, overwhelmed but grateful. "Yeah, bud. It really is." Lauren didn't come over after that. But she didn't have to. I could see the tension in her jaw, the way she clutched her purse a little tighter, the subtle panic that crept in when she realized she wasn't in control of the room anymore. But the real twist? That came when the check arrived. Not mine. Hers. Because you see, what Lauren didn't know, what nobody at her table knew, was that the restaurant had a policy for large private dining reservations. A mandatory minimum spend of $3,000 for parties using the private room on a Friday night. And when you don't meet the minimum, they don't cancel the charge. They just charge you anyway. And someone at that table had just ordered sparkling water and salad. But I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. Because the manager? He was already walking toward their table. And her face, the moment she saw that number on the bill, let's just say, the look she gave me from across the room, was worth every single sparkler. When we left the restaurant that night, Ben was still buzzing from the sugar and the attention. He clutched one of the gold-dusted strawberries like it was a trophy, recapping every detail from the dessert spectacle with the kind of breathless excitement only a 12-year-old could manage. I smiled and nodded as he spoke, but my thoughts were somewhere else entirely. The rush of adrenaline from the moment, Lauren's frozen face, the manager's quiet solidarity, the quiet power of being seen, had started to wear off. And now I felt it. That weird, empty ache in your chest after you finally stand up for yourself. That question you don't want to ask. Did I go too far? I didn't say much on the ride home. Ben dozed off halfway through, still mumbling about the lava mountain cake. But my mind was spinning. Not with guilt exactly. More like exhaustion. Emotional hangover, maybe. The thing is, standing up to Lauren didn't fix anything. It didn't rewrite the past. It didn't change the fact that I was still the afterthought sibling. The one who only mattered when someone needed a spare hand or a quiet favor. That night was a spark, sure. But I could feel it already. It wouldn't change the way the rest of the family saw me. If anything, it might just confirm their quiet suspicions. Kyle's dramatic. Overreacts. Makes a scene. And maybe I had overstepped. I didn't regret treating Ben to something special. But the part with the custom dessert, the triple-tiered spectacle, I wondered if it had come off as petty. Was I trying to give my son a memory, or was I trying to get even? That question lingered for weeks. Lauren didn't reach out after the dinner. No text, no call. Not even a passive-aggressive group message with a link to birthday photos. I wasn't expecting an apology. She'd never once apologized for anything in her life. But the silence was heavy. Intentional. My mom, of course, got involved in the way only she could. I heard things got a little awkward at the restaurant, she said over the phone one afternoon, drawing out the word awkward like it had thorns. Awkward, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She told us there wasn't room. We had to eat separately. Well, she said with that practiced sigh. You have to understand, Lauren puts a lot of effort into these events. Planning for kids, making sure everything runs smoothly. Maybe you should have communicated better. I closed my eyes. There it is. Mom, I said. She invited me. She told me the time and place. She didn't say anything about RSVPs or limited seating. I'm just saying, maybe if you'd called ahead. She told me I should have called ahead after we showed up. A pause. Well, maybe she was just stressed. And then I heard about some extravagant dessert. I almost laughed. So now I'm the problem? I didn't say that, she replied, but her tone said exactly that. The conversation ended soon after. No resolution. No support. Just more of the same. Tiptoeing around Lauren's feelings, minimizing mine. That was the moment I realized something else. This wasn't rock bottom because of what Lauren did. It was rock bottom because I kept expecting people who never saw me to suddenly understand me. I'd spent most of my life shrinking myself to fit their comfort zones, downplaying wins, laughing off slights, telling myself, that's just how she is. But what was I teaching Ben if I kept doing that? I didn't want him to grow up thinking love meant tolerating disrespect, or that family meant obligation without boundaries. I wanted him to know his worth, and that meant I had to start showing him mine. So, I stopped waiting for validation. I stopped replying to group chats that only existed to celebrate Lauren's milestones. I didn't send gifts for her twins' next event. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend myself. I just stepped back. And in the quiet that followed, something unexpected happened. I started to breathe again. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't expending energy trying to manage family politics. I wasn't rehearsing comebacks or replaying arguments in my head. I had space. And in that space, I started to focus on something I'd long neglected, me. I'd always been creative, drawing, painting, designing. But I'd buried that side for years, working in IT to keep things stable for Ben after the divorce. It paid the bills, sure, but it never fulfilled me. One night, after Ben had gone to bed, I pulled out my old sketch pad from the back of the closet and started doodling. It felt awkward at first, like picking up a language you hadn't spoken in years. But muscle memory kicked in. One doodle became a sketch. One sketch became a full-page illustration. And one night, I posted a few of them anonymously to a Reddit art thread, just to see what people thought. The response blew me away. People liked my work. They really liked it. Comments poured in, questions, compliments, even a couple of commission requests. I hadn't even thought about making money off it, but suddenly it didn't seem so far-fetched. I started putting in 2 hours every night after Ben went to bed. Not grinding, not hustling, just creating. For me, for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. And Ben noticed. You've been in a better mood lately, he said one morning over breakfast. I blinked. Really? Yeah, he said. You don't seem tired anymore. I smiled, ruffled his hair. That's because I've been drawing again. Cool, he grinned. Can you teach me? That moment, that one little comment. It meant more than any apology Lauren could have ever given. From there, things snowballed in the best way. I started an Instagram art page. Took on a few small gigs, logos, pet portraits, even a book cover for an indie author. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was something. A side income, a side identity, something I owned. Ben and I started doing art nights every Friday. We'd put on music, grab snacks, and draw together. Sometimes he'd try to copy my style. Other times he'd do wild, abstract stuff I'd never think of. I could see the way it gave him confidence, the same way it was giving me back my voice. And with every passing week, the bitterness faded. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need Lauren to hurt. I just needed to heal. But, of course, family doesn't let you go quietly. It started with a birthday invitation. Not Ben's. Mine. A card arrived in the mail, in Lauren's handwriting. We're doing a little joint birthday dinner for Mom and Kyle. Family only. Dress nice. RSVP. I stared at it for a long time. No call. No text. No apology. Just a neatly written invitation, like nothing had happened. And the location? The same restaurant. Same private room. Same Friday night. I nearly tossed the card in the trash. But something held me back. Because I knew Lauren. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a reset. An attempt to reestablish control. To rewrite the narrative. To bring me back into the fold, on her terms. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't coming back to be quiet. And if Lauren wanted a dinner, she was about to get more than she bargained for. The invitation sat on the corner of my desk for 3 days. Not because I was debating whether or not to go. Deep down, I already knew the answer. I was going. But not as the same version of Kyle they expected. Not the quiet sibling who'd nod along while being sidelined. Not the doormat who smiled through gritted teeth and tried to keep the peace. That Kyle was gone. This wasn't just a birthday dinner. It was a test. Lauren was trying to reassert control. She'd chosen the restaurant. She'd included me this time, but not with warmth. With calculation. Like she was saying, see, I can be generous when I want to be, but only if you play along. Except this time, I wasn't showing up to play along. I was showing up to make a statement, and I already knew exactly how to do it. The first thing I did was call Steve, the manager from the restaurant. I didn't expect him to remember me. It had been over a month since the twins' dinner. But the moment I said my name and mentioned the triple-decker dessert, he laughed. How could I forget, he said. You're the guy who made my pastry chef cry. In a good way, by the way. She said that was the most fun she's had plating something in years. I smiled. Well, I've got a bit of a situation, and I think you might be the only person who can help. He listened as I explained the invitation. The setup. The way Lauren operated. I kept my tone casual, but honest. I didn't want to lie or exaggerate. I just wanted him to understand. He did. Let me guess, Steve said dryly. Private room again. Limited seats. Everything perfectly orchestrated. Exactly, I said. Let me check the booking. He clicked away in the background. Yup. Friday night. Same table. Reserved for 10. That's what? Your mom, Lauren, her husband, the twins, you and your son, and probably a +1 or 2. My chest tightened. 10 seats. Just enough to make it feel like a family dinner, but not enough to invite anyone outside the immediate circle. And once again, Lauren had made herself the gatekeeper of inclusion. I want to shake things up, I said. Nothing loud. Nothing petty. Just something to remind her I'm not playing by her rules anymore. Steve paused. Do you want a separate table again? No, I said. This time, I want a seat at that table. And that was the beginning. Over the next few days, I started putting things in motion. Step 1. Bring someone she didn't expect. Now, Lauren had always taken subtle jabs at my social life. At family events, she'd throw out lines like, Kyle's too busy to date. He's got Ben and, well, his doodles. Or she'd say, some people are meant to be parents, some are meant to be single, and some are meant to be both. Passive-aggressive nonsense. She loved playing the game where she hinted I was somehow less adult because I hadn't remarried or paraded someone new around. And normally, I didn't care. But this time, I had a card to play. A month ago, I'd started talking to someone, Marissa. We met through an online art community. She was a graphic designer based one city over, with a wicked sense of humor and a quiet intensity that reminded me a little of myself. We'd only been on 3 dates, but we clicked. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be the center of attention, but she got me. So I called her. This might sound insane, I said, but would you be willing to come to a family dinner with me this Friday? Dinner? She repeated, skeptical. At a restaurant where my sister once exiled me and my son to the sidelines. A pause. Now I'm interested. I totally understand if it's too soon or too weird, but I'll go, she said. Just like that. Step 2. Dress the part. I don't mean fancy. Lauren expected fancy. She lived for aesthetics. I wanted something sharper. Subtle. Confident. I found a tailored navy blazer I hadn't worn in years, paired it with a clean white tee, dark jeans, and a pair of boots that didn't scream, trying too hard, but still made a statement. Ben wore a new charcoal button-down and chinos. Marissa, of course, looked effortlessly elegant in a deep burgundy dress that made Lauren's pastel wardrobe look like wallpaper. Step 3. Control the narrative before she could. See, Lauren always thrived on surprise. She liked people being caught off guard, scrambling to react. That's how she stayed in power, by being the one who set the tempo. So I flipped it. The morning of the dinner, I posted a picture to my Instagram art account. It wasn't flashy, just a photo of Ben and me sketching together at the park, captioned, 1 year ago I was stuck in a place that drained me. Tonight, I celebrate not just my birthday, but the quiet wins that saved my life, and the people who made it worth rebuilding. It blew up more than I expected. A few of my pieces had gone semi-viral over the past month, and I guess people had been waiting for a glimpse behind the curtain. Comments poured in. Support. Encouragement. People cheering me on. Lauren followed me on Instagram. I knew she saw it. She liked the post within an hour, but didn't comment, which, in her language, was louder than any insult. Step 4, arrive last. She always loved to be the grand entrance. This time, I gave her the spotlight. Let her bask in it. I even called Steve ahead of time and asked, if we arrive a few minutes late, can you make sure there's someone to walk us in personally? He chuckled. You got it. And so we did. Ben, Marissa, and I walked in exactly 8 minutes late. A sharply dressed hostess greeted us and led us down the familiar hallway. I could already hear the chatter from the private dining room. Lauren's voice, too loud with laughter. Paul chiming in with one of his boring anecdotes. My mom asking questions no one was answering. The door opened, and everything stopped. Every head turned. Lauren froze mid-sentence. Her eyes darted between me, Marissa, and Ben. Then she smiled, too tight, too fast. Oh, Kyle, she said. You're here? We were starting to worry. I texted you we were on our way, I said smoothly, placing a hand on Marissa's back as we entered. Traffic was a nightmare. She glanced at Marissa, smile faltering. This is Marissa, I added. A good friend. She's a designer. Marissa extended her hand politely. Thanks for having me. Lauren took it, then dropped it just a bit too quickly. Well, we hadn't planned for plus ones. Good thing the reservation was for 10, I said, glancing at the table. And it was 10 perfect seats. All occupied, except 3. Ours. She had no out. We sat, Ben between Marissa and me. My mother opposite us, looking mildly stunned. Paul raised his glass in a half-hearted toast and said something about the birthday boy finally arriving. Lauren tried to recover. She steered the conversation to neutral topics. She talked about a work trip Paul had taken. She mentioned the twins' latest extracurriculars. She even threw in a passive-aggressive joke. We all thought Kyle was keeping us in suspense. Classic artistic temperament, right? I smiled. I like to make an entrance. Guess it runs in the family. Paul chuckled. My mother looked down at her menu. But the tension was thick. Marissa handled herself like a pro. She asked thoughtful questions. She complimented the twins on their hobbies. She laughed at appropriate moments. She didn't overshare, didn't fawn, didn't try to prove anything. And that unsettled Lauren more than if she'd brought a spotlight and a marching band. Because Marissa wasn't trying to win. She was just there, comfortable, confident. And it threw off Lauren's whole act. By the time appetizers arrived, she was spiraling. You know, she said suddenly, sipping her wine. Kyle's always been the mysterious one. The artist. The free spirit. We never know what he's working on, do we? I set down my fork. Actually, I've been working on a children's book. Illustrations and all. Got picked up by a publisher last month. A hush fell over the table. My mom's eyes widened. Really? I nodded. Yeah. It's about a kid who finds strength in being different. Inspired by Ben. Marissa reached over and squeezed my hand gently. That's amazing, my mom said genuinely. Lauren recovered fast. Well, isn't that sweet, she said, smiling too wide. Kyle always had a vivid imagination. Good thing he's finally putting it to use. Ben, God bless him, piped up right then. He also has over 30 commissions now. And his art was featured in an online magazine. I hadn't told him to say that. I hadn't even known he remembered. But the pride in his voice? That did something to me. Lauren blinked. Well, I guess we've all been busy lately. I smiled. Some of us more than others. And with that, the balance shifted. The table had turned. Not through yelling. Not through spectacle. But through presence. Through proof. I was no longer the background character in Lauren's perfectly curated family narrative. I was the one rewriting the script. And yet, I wasn't done. Because dessert hadn't come yet. And neither had the real surprise. The clink of forks, murmurs of awkward compliments, and the occasional forced laugh filled the room like white noise. By the time dessert rolled around, Lauren's performative warmth had calcified into something colder. She still wore the polite smile, still tilted her head with interest when someone else spoke, but her eyes kept flicking toward me. Watching, calculating, waiting for a misstep she could pounce on. I didn't give her one. I'd said almost nothing since dropping the children's book bomb. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because the silence was louder. My absence from the usual family chatter unsettled her. Lauren thrived when she was managing the script. But now I wasn't feeding her lines. I wasn't giving her a foil. I was just sitting, calm, present, unbothered. And it was driving her nuts. When the waiter brought out the dessert menu, Lauren perked up. Her chance to reclaim the moment. Should we do a shared dessert again? She asked the table. Like we did at the twins' birthday? My mother nodded politely. Paul gave a non-committal shrug. The twins, half asleep by now, didn't care. Lauren looked to me. What do you think, Kyle? I sipped my coffee and met her gaze. Actually, I already arranged something. She blinked. You did? I spoke with Steve last week. He's got something special lined up. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed, slightly. Just a nudge. Enough for the room to hush. And then it rolled in. A cart pushed by 2 servers, flanked by a third holding a tray of sparkling glasses. On the cart was a large, layered dessert. Not a carbon copy of the one from the twins' party, but a refined evolution. This one was elegant. Sculptural. A tower of white chocolate mousse, caramel-drizzled profiteroles, and dark chocolate shards fanned like wings. Gold-dusted raspberries glistened in the candlelight. On the top tier, a thin slate of tempered chocolate, engraved in white script. To Kyle, for rising quietly, but powerfully. Gasps and quiet wow-s escaped the guests. Even Paul leaned in for a better look. Ben's eyes went wide. Marissa grinned. Lauren? She froze. I stood. Thank you, I said to the servers, then turned to the table. I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to mark this moment. Lauren found her voice. That's quite a gesture. I smiled. It is. She gave a little laugh. I mean, it's lovely. But don't you think it's a bit much? This was supposed to be a shared dinner. Not just your celebration. There it was. The crack. The simmer beneath the surface. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right. But for the past decade, every family dinner has been about someone else. Someone's promotion, someone's kid's recital, someone's curated perfection. And I've always sat quietly, congratulating everyone, applauding the show, trying not to take up space. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. This time, I wanted to try something different. Not out of spite. Just to remind myself that I'm allowed to be seen. A pause. To remind Ben that being kind doesn't mean being invisible. Lauren's face twitched, like she was deciding whether to double down or back off. I didn't give her the chance. Oh, and one more thing, I said, setting down my coffee. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Thick paper. Formal. I wasn't going to bring this up tonight. But since we're all here, I handed the envelope across the table to my mother. She took it cautiously. What's this? A letter from Dad's lawyer, I said evenly. About the trust fund. Lauren paled. What are you talking about? My mom opened the envelope and began reading. Her eyes widened. You see, I continued, voice still calm. Before Dad passed, he set up a trust. One for each of us. But the language was a bit particular. The terms were conditional. Lauren was frozen. Dad wasn't oblivious, Mom. He saw how things were going. The dynamics. The favoritism. The silences. And he wanted to correct that. My mother looked up at me, stunned. He left you. A controlling interest, I said. In the family cabin. The one Lauren's been renting out as an Airbnb for the past 2 summers. Paul suddenly sat up straighter. Wait, what? I turned to him. Yeah. The deed's been in a trust this whole time. Lauren's name is on the usage lease, but not the ownership. I looked back at my sister. And the clause says that if any beneficiary demonstrates exclusionary behavior toward another, especially involving their child, the trust can be restructured. Lauren's voice cracked. You're bluffing. Check with the lawyer, I said. His number's on the back page. She grabbed the envelope from my mom, scanning the pages like a drowning woman looking for a rope. Paul leaned over her shoulder. Is this real? Lauren didn't answer. I stood again. I don't want the cabin, Lauren. I don't want your parties or your spotlight. But I will protect what's mine. And I won't let my son be treated like a second-class citizen in his own family. No one spoke. The only sound was the clink of a fork dropping on a plate. I exhaled. So here's the deal. I'm going to assume control of the cabin lease starting next month. You can remove it from your Airbnb listings. I've already spoken with the management company, and I've decided Ben and I will spend a few weeks there this summer, just the 2 of us. No drama, no performance. Lauren looked like she'd swallowed glass. And going forward, I added, I'll decide when and if we attend family gatherings. If I'm invited, I'll assume it's sincere. If not, I'm okay with that, too. I turned to my mom. No hard feelings. But I won't keep showing up to be someone's backdrop. She nodded slowly. Tears in her eyes. Maybe guilt. Maybe something else. but she said nothing. Marissa stood beside me, placing a hand on my back. Ben looked up at me with awe. And then I smiled, genuinely, for the first time all night. Thanks for dinner. We walked out as dessert was served. As the door closed behind us, I could hear the silence still ringing in that perfect little dining room. That was the last family dinner I attended for a long time. But it was the first night I truly felt free. Not just from Lauren. From the need to explain. To prove. To perform. I didn't need their approval anymore. Because I'd built something better. I'd built me. And I'd shown my son that quiet people don't stay quiet forever. Sometimes, we just wait for the perfect moment. Then we make sure it echoes.